Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what-ifs. Today we're jumping into part 4 of What If Naruto Has Chance for a Prophecy? So strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this shinobi grinding. The warm beams of the afternoon sun stroked his skin like a tender lover, while the breeze playfully caught his golden locks, twisting, picking and tugging them childishly around his fine features. Uzumaki Naruto silently stood in front of an obsidian stone, his sight locked on the always shiny surface which already held hundreds of names. His blue orbs ran through the names carved into the stone, then unconsciously moved to other empty parts of the memorial that he knew would eventually be filled with familiar names if he failed. His eyes locked onto a particular point, where the black stone was spotted with copper-colored flecks and fine curves, the place where his father's and mother's names were or would be carved onto its surface. His hands locked harder onto the soft stem of the one single, pure white Madonna lily that he picked up from Inoichi's newly opened flower store. A half-smile appeared on his face when the image popped up of the surprised and confused interrogator while he had handed over the flower. He was sure he would receive questions later, but he didn't care this time. He wanted to do this, and it had to be done. Naruto squeezed the stem one more time, before he placed it lightly in front of the memorial, and gently stroked its cold surface with his hand unconsciously. His teeth painfully clenched together, while sorrow overwhelmed his mind. Kurama silently withdrew into the deepest part of his mind, leaving as much private space for his mourning as he could manage. The blonde teen silently mourned for people still alive or not even born yet, for people not aware of their own death. He mourned for his still living and breathing parents, for his friends, for his precious people, for the people of Konoha and the other nations, and for the countless nameless shinobi and civilians from all over the elemental countries who had given their lives for only one cause: to live free in the real world, to defeat Madara and to defend him. Naruto spirited away from Konoha and sunk deep into the ink-black abyss of his grief to mourn for the living for one last time. A lean figure stood above an unmoving and lifeless form on the ground, between unnatural forms. The chirping of thousands of birds slowly died down, while the blue glow slowly faded away from the corners and sides of the cube around them. Hatake Kakashi slowly shook his head and let out a long and weary breath, his silver locks following the movement, slowly swinging together with his head in the motion. He could only distantly feel as someone gently placed his hand on his shoulder and squeezed it reassuringly, trying to shake him from his stupor back to reality. "Sensei, let's go." Kakashi slowly nodded with the last sane remains of his mind, showing that despite his blank look he acknowledged his voice. A piece of his heart and mind died once more, together with the shadow of his once teammate, as did a small amount of his own sanity. He had seen him die once, and now he had killed him once more. "We have to get back. Now!" The Jounin flinched and finally turned his head toward the source of the loud voice to face his student. The shadow of his memories darkened his eyes, and for a second, just for a brief second, he saw his own sensei in front of him. He felt Minato's gentle hands on his shoulders. He saw his blonde locks, his long white coat swinging behind him, instead of his student's. The apparition gently faded away, but one thing remained. The piercing azure orbs, identical to his once sensei's eyes, watching him with concern. Eyes, which were the last remains of his former team, and maybe the last things that held together his sanity. They reminded him of every single one of his losses, his acts, his failures. However, now those eyes gave him more than just sorrow, guilt, and painful memories. They gave him hope. They always gave him hope, pushing him to live and go further even when he was allowed only to watch him from the shadows, fearing that someone would connect the dots before he was able to defend himself. "Naruto, let's get out of here." The blonde teen only nodded in response, determination shining in his blue eyes. For weary and bloody forms appeared next to the three commanders of the allied shinobi forces. Their eyes ran over the battlefield, several of them wide from the loss of numbers. Others were forced by willpower to look calm and collected, belonging to shinobi whose hearts were hardened into stone by the years. Gaara frantically searched the fields, desperately looking for his people and his siblings. A long, relieved sigh left his tight chest, when he spotted two familiar forms far away, still fighting. A calm and commanding tone kicked him out from his own small words. "Darui! Report!" Reikage-sama, Uchiha Obito, the one known as Tobi, has been eliminated. Our forces are now fighting against the real Uchiha Madara and the Jibi. It seems that their forces are slowly falling. The sealing team is preparing an attempt to seal away the two of them in one attack. They need a lot of time to prepare. We have also suffered great losses in every division. More than half of our forces have fallen, and our headquarters. The young commander suddenly shut his mouth, looking for the words to describe their situation, but he found none that could even nearly do it justice. Two figures appeared beside them suddenly, and golden light illuminated weary and bloody faces all around them. A stunned blonde teen swung his head around, desperately looking for someone. His mouth moved to ask a question, though he already knew the answer. Where is the Godame? Where is Tsunade Bachan? 4 pairs of eyes glanced toward the blonde teen, but no one said a word. They just let the silence fall amongst them as an answer. A hand was placed onto Naruto's already trembling shoulder, but he immediately shook it off violently as soon as it made contact. His hands clenched into fists, his joints becoming white from the strain as he attempted to channel his growing despair somewhere. With an effort that rose above any normal human's, Naruto forced back the lump in his throat and the sting in his eyes. His now foggy azure pools moved toward the hard ground, but he couldn't find any reassurance in the blood-soaked soil. His hazy gaze found the only thing that stood out: a small green leaf. But it was frayed at the edge and not just one crimson stain dyed its surface. He tried, but no matter how much wanted to, he couldn't move his gaze from it. Naruto, she used the last remains of her strength to save us. She is gone. Gaara's voice was uncharacteristically soft, barely loud enough to be called a whisper, but the named boy shook his head violently, still trying to deny the truth with every fiber of his being. His eyes never let go of the small leaf. They were winning, but without Tsunade Bachan his previous determination and hope for success was slowly starting to fade. It shouldn't be like this, he whispered into the heavy air. Brada! He limped toward the small team, eyeing his leader and his only remaining family member, dwelling on his bloody clothes and wounds without comment. The sounds of the nearby battle somehow became only a distant whisper as everybody retreated into his thoughts for a short, silent minute to salute the fallen. Uzumaki Naruto! Blonde locks followed his head's sudden movement as it swung toward a small, old man with a commanding voice, finally releasing the bloody leaf in front of his foot from his gaze. The Godame Hokage left an important message for you. A soft, proud smile appeared on the wrinkled face of the Tsuchikage. His features smoothed over, as did his wrinkles, and suddenly, he looked at least a decade younger. You are in charge. The soft smile became almost fatherly before the Tsuchikage continued. The 4 Kage have also agreed to the decision. Welcome to our line, Rokudame Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. Naruto's heart stopped beating for a moment. His lungs forgot to breathe and his blood froze in his veins as he was overwhelmed by pride and pure joy. Azure eyes trailed across the landscape slowly, taking in every sight, hovering on some spots where he knew his comrades laid, dead or wounded. His joy slowly disappeared as it was replaced by sorrow and maybe a hint, if only a small hint, of regret. Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's #1 most unpredictable and noisiest ninja, proved one more time that he had earned his moniker. I decline. Silence fell among the people around the Kages and the commanders, while a sour smile appeared behind the dark blue mask of his teacher. I'm not ready for the hat. Not yet. The Kazekage stepped toward his first friend, his eyes soft. However, his usual calm expression never left his face. You just proved that you are ready, my friend. Naruto made a sour smile, but he shook his head. The smile slowly melted into a wide and oh-so-familiar grin. The Nanadame Hokage still sounds good, Databayo. But for the Rokudame we need someone else. Someone who is more suited to that title in this situation. His eyes traveled toward his sensei, who just stared back with his well-known uninterested and bored expression as always. An explosion shook the ground and all heads turned toward the battlefield, where an enormous tail met with the hard ground. We should continue this after that thing is pounded into the ground, Kakashi stated calmly. A giant black ball formed in front of the enormous mouth of the 10-tailed beast. Black as the deepest abyss of space, but somehow still glowing with a murderous light. The landscape shook when the enormous attack made impact in the middle of the battlefield, sending hundreds of shinobi into the embrace of the death god in an instant. The moans and yelps of the dying echoed throughout the land, while, with another shake of the earth, A tail crashed next to a blonde teen, forcing him to dodge to the side. An unnatural roar echoed along the landscape. A single shadow clone appeared next to Naruto after he formed the familiar cross-like hand sign, and it immediately moved into a meditative stance to gather energy from the dying nature around them. The beast roared once more, and its claws flung in the opposite direction where a handful of shinobi had launched an attack to distract the monster, while the others prepared another distraction so that the sealing team, who waited patiently in the background, could launch into action when their time came. Shikamaru jumped next to the weary blonde teen, his eyes foggy from strain and suppressed emotions, but in the next moment, he was collected again. Naruto! When the sealing team takes action, lead and cover them. You've got 1 more minute to prepare. The blonde teen only nodded in response, and sneaked a peek behind his shoulder to check on his clone. The familiar orange patterns had already formed around his eyes, and the hair on his neck rose as the increasing amount of natural energy flowing toward his copy flew by his ear. The clone suddenly snapped his golden eyes open and immediately jumped toward the 2 young men to grab them. Their bodies flew helplessly across the battlefield as the copy threw them to safety. Nature's energy hit him as soon as his clone dispersed inside the hell of flames, together with the sealing team, where they had stood not even a second ago with Shikamaru. The memories of his clone appeared inside his head, his guilt, his struggle, and his final decision to save them instead of the others, all while they were still flying through midair. A heavy breath left Naruto when the air was forced out from his lungs as his body connected with the hard soil. They finally stopped after plowing a long scar into the hard ground. The place they had previously stood disappeared inside the inferno of an enormous, flaming sphere. The young blonde shinobi jumped to his feet in an instant, ignoring the stabbing pain in his left thigh. A sharp wooden shard stuck out from his muscles, painting red lines all over his orange pants until his blood dripped onto the hard ground to mix with the sea of blood already forming on the battlefield. A small, almost invisible stream twisted between small rocks to meet with another puddle of the red liquid only steps from him, where not even an hour ago he placed down the body of his friend who had once been so blinded by destiny. Weary azure orbs traveled toward the body of Hyuga, then moved to the side and locked onto the body of another comrade. Her dark blue hair was stained with dirt and blood, but the small smile was still frozen on her gentle face. Fortunately, her eyes were closed. He wouldn't have been able to endure this for another second if he had seen the emptiness in her eyes. He had only just accepted her feelings, had just made a promise half an hour ago that he would take her on a date, and they would go out for a ramen when all of this was finished. He was weary and tired. He just wanted to lay down and sleep, and hopefully wake up from this nightmare. Actually, he wasn't just simply tired. He felt dead. Everything went slowly downhill since the 4 Kage appeared. Everything. And since he declined to become the Rokudame. The temptation rose inside his chest for a split second, to just let it be, just let the Uchiha do what he wants, let him erase the memories of the war, let him cast the Genjutsu, let him bring the false dream world where everybody is alive. His hands clenched into fists, unconsciously looking for the heat that had been there only an hour ago, when Hinata had been holding his hand until her last breath, never releasing him, not even for a second. The temptation immediately disappeared and was replaced with guilt, squeezing his stomach into a small tight ball. How could he even think about the possibility for a second? Give up? He can't give up. With willpower greater than a normal human, he forced his head to finally turn and release the sight of Hinata's already cooling body. His eyes met with the shocked and wide orbs of his genius classmate, and in that 1 second he saw a hint of raw panic in Shikamaru's obsidian black eyes. No, without the sealing team, Madara Nara flung his gaze toward the battle, the panic disappearing and replaced with calculation. Naruto could almost hear as the gears turned and thoughts and plans ran inside his head with insane speed. The young jounin squeezed his eyes shut for a long moment, before he nodded to himself. Azure eyes locked with red and purple ones as the red glow slowly faded away from them. The golden flames slowly, almost motionlessly, disappeared from his body, while the wooden restraints squeezed him tighter, forcing out a painful hiss from his lips, along with his last remains of Kurama's chakra from his body. You have caused me a big headache. I have to admit this, Kyubi. But you've only managed to slow down my plans. The current ninja world will be destroyed and the infinite Tsukuyomi will be finished even without Obito. I already know how. This is the last time I'll say this, I won't let it. The words were pressed through his clenched teeth, but still sounded powerful and determined. You are injured and out of chakra. Even the hasn't got the energy to heal you. Naruto closed his eyes for a second, to reach out for nature's energy, but his already overstrained muscles didn't stop trembling, no matter how desperately he tried to force them to stop. How long will it take, Kurama? I got a situation out here. I know. Hold on just a little bit longer. A sour, but still cocky smile appeared on his face. We haven't got that much time. The fox didn't answer. Just stay still and let me finish my plan, the Uchiha taunted. I'm a stubborn brat, you red-eyed moron. Madara suddenly stiffened and a wide, almost insane grin spread across his face. Finally, they are finished. A confused frown appeared on Naruto's face. Finished? Who? And what did they finish? Madara smirked. Let's just say, I played with some of our very, very old friends. What are you talking about? The ancient Uchiha snorted, then instead of answering Naruto's question a smirk appeared on his face as he replied. Stalling for time? Good plan, however war is already mine. A wooden spear lashed from Madara's chest, aiming for the blonde. Naruto struggled inside his restraints, desperately trying to move out of the way, however the spear never reached him. A tentacle shot forward, deflecting the spear, which embedded itself into the hard soil behind the struggling teen. Byakugan! Naruto! Don't give up! Bro is coming! The Kumo shinobi shouted, while the tentacle slowly moved back into his crouching body. Well, what do we have here? Wooden Vine shot toward the heavily panting, who didn't have the power to move. B stayed in his hunched position, overwhelmed by his exhaustion, while the wooden vines enclosed around his weary and bloody body without so much as a twitch of his finger. B's body screamed to move, to struggle, to shoot forward and tear away his restraints together with the enemy in front of him. However, in the deep abyss of his mind, he had already given up the fight. The blond boy finally forced his weary body to stay still, forced his muscles to relax with the last bit of his logical mind, desperately reaching out for nature's energy. When the first flecks of orange appeared around his eyes, the wooden restraints blew into shreds. But before he could reach his comrade, B simply disappeared from sight inside a lazily swirling vortex. Naruto was already reaching out to tear away the wooden vines, but his hands met with empty space. A satisfied chuckle echoed behind him, and when he turned his head toward its source, his eyes met with the pleased expression on Madara's face. I should thank you, Uzumaki Naruto. Without you, I wouldn't be able to capture the eight-tailed this easily. I'm grateful. However, I should leave now. I have some important business with that present of yours. And am meeting with someone else. Madara started to run through hand signs. He didn't stop even for a second when Naruto sprung into action and shot toward the man, his fist already ready to meet his face. However, before it could happen, a satisfied half-smile appeared on Madara's face, then he and the simply disappeared from the battlefield. Naruto stared at the empty space in front of him for a long second, before he collapsed onto his knees. His brain shut down, forcing out every sound around him. His mind didn't work, his heart didn't beat, and his lungs didn't function, just like before. The yelps and moans around him didn't register in his mind. The soft hands of a pink-haired kunoichi on his shoulders didn't reach him. His eyes were still focused on the vacant area in front of him, where Madara had disappeared. Suddenly the shock wore off, and his eyes finally locked with Sakura's green orbs. After blinking rapidly to clear his foggy mind, muffled voices started to reach his consciousness. Naruto! What happened? The Jubi simply disappeared. The blonde only shook his head as a response, but in the end, he managed to press out words from his lumped throat. He got B. Someone violently grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. His eyes locked with the Raikage's furious but also concerned eyes, forcing him to avert his gaze to escape from the stabbing and demanding glare. He was protecting me and I am sorry. The Raikage slowly released his shoulders and walked farther from the small group, while his voice echoed around them. The remains of our forces are heading back to Wind Country. That is the nearest place, and it will be our new temporary headquarters. We will talk there about Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto sank down into the soft, golden sand to watch the fading light on the horizon. The world around him seemed to burn with orange, gold and brilliant red flames as the setting sun's last beams reached the surface with the waving hot air. A soft, but burning hot breeze ruffled his golden locks, picking up the small grains of sand, mixing it with his hair, hiding them under his clothes. But it still felt pleasant and peaceful instead of irritating. With small movements of his toes, he dug his foot deep inside the golden sand, enjoying the feeling with closed eyes as it encompassed him, flowing between his toes. His mind drifted back to last week, to the fight between them and Madara. His troubled thoughts wandered to a scene where he had sensed something so unnerving it made his heart ache. He had sensed him. He had sensed Sasuke in Sage Mode, but only for a short minute before his presence had faded away somewhere in Yuzu, as if he had disappeared from the earth. That had been the last time. Since then it didn't matter how hard he tried, something masked his presence from his senses. The blonde gritted his teeth. He also sensed one more very familiar and disturbing presence. But that was impossible. He hoped it was impossible. It couldn't be that Orochimaru was alive. The Edo Tensei had been broken. Only Madara stayed with the living, and it couldn't be that the snake had become that powerful, could it? The soft ruffle of clothes in the background didn't kick him out from his musing. You left the village. After a long silent minute, Naruto finally opened his eyes to meet with the stabbing emerald green orbs of Gaara. I'm just outside of the village walls by a meter. You want to scold me again just like yesterday on the balcony? I get it. I won't leave. The Kazekage didn't answer, just averted his gaze to watch the sunset together with his friend. Why did you decline the title? Naruto only shrugged and didn't answer for long, silent minutes in the hope that Gaara would simply forget his question if he ignored him long enough. It worked for quite a while before the Kazekage spoke again. So? The blonde teen let out a long sigh and rubbed his eyes. There goes his plan. I'm not strong enough or wise enough for that title. Not yet. I was a fool, I thought it would be easy. My goals have changed. I have changed. But it's not enough. I need to become stronger. I need to become smarter. I need to catch up with Dad. Konoha's next Hokage can't be a moron like me. The Kazekage watched him with a still, stoic expression for a long, silent minute before he opened his mouth. You are stronger than any of the Kages. You can motivate people, you can give them hope. Yes, you can act like an idiot, yes, maybe you are not mature enough for that position, and yes, you always act before you think, but you have friends around you who will help you, who can support you and lead you in the right direction. You are definitely a good leader. You were always fighting not only for the sake of Konoha, but for all of us, even before the alliance formed. For all shinobi. You should be by our side, where Tsunade once stood. So many of them died, I made so many promises that in the end I can't, and will never be able to fulfill. How could I lead them? Don't throw away your dreams for the sake of a lost soul who doesn't want to come out from the darkness. It hasn't been about him for a long time. I know what I have to do with him, Naruto muttered his answer. He knew perfectly well who Gaara was referring to even without a name. Then what? You were always shouting that you wouldn't die before you became Hokage. That was your final goal. Did you give up? Did you give up your dreams? Naruto didn't avert his gaze, nor answer for a second. It's not that. I still want to become Hokage. But my reasons have changed. When I was small, I wanted to become Hokage so people would acknowledge me. Itachi was right. I already earned that acknowledgement. But I don't feel prepared for what I have to do. The war. This war made me realize a lot of things. That I can't save everyone. That I can't think anymore about life like I did before. If I become Hokage, maybe I would be the one who'd send my comrades to their death. I'm not wise enough for that. His gaze drifted back to the horizon, his mind empty and his expression blank. Gaara let out a sigh and soft sand reached out for Naruto's aid, loosening the tufted black stripes and let it fall into his lap, while Naruto glanced at his friend with a surprised expression. But its place on his forehead was almost immediately replaced with a new forehead protector, one kanji shining proudly in the middle of it, Shinobi. When you think your time has come, when you think you are ready to wear the hat, you can replace your 8 with your old one. Until that time, you are a shinobi of the allied forces. Naruto watched silently as his friend left, before he turned toward the settling sun again, and his hand tightened around the somehow still cold metal plate, which, not a minute ago, was proudly fastened onto his forehead. An enormous explosion shook the world. Dust and debris flew across the landscape as the blast of air picked up those who didn't have enough chakra, speed, or simple strength to properly stick themselves to the ground. An animalistic, gruesome roar echoed in the air, the voice of something definitely not from this world. With enormous speed and power, another tail swung and smashed into the ground with the sound and force of an explosion. The remains of the Allied shinobi forces desperately struggled to stop the destruction and gain enough time to evacuate the civilians in the distance from Sunagekure no Sato, where they had taken shelter after the first battle with Madara for a short, peaceful week. Naruto! Retreat and leave with the civilians! The Godane Kazekage arrived at the head of the giant toad boss, jumping down from a small sand cloud. His face was bloody, his hair was a mess, dust and small cuts covered his clothes and skin. I won't leave you behind. There is still a chance to set it back without Madara here. We only have to deal with the alone. Naruto! You are exhausted and our forces are almost gone. The rest of the Kages are gone. We've only a handful of the force with Temari and a fraction of the 2nd and 4th Division. There is no chance for us, but you must survive, the young Kage shouted out with despair. I won't leave my comrades behind. I will never leave this battlefield, Databeo. I am the Godane Kazekage and the regimental commander of the Allied shinobi forces. You are a shinobi. I command you to retreat. No. The blonde's answer was simple and demanding. His voice lacked any of his previous anger. Naruto, you saved me. You saved my sanity, my soul, and my body countless times. Gaara's voice was now soft and kind without any trace of his own previous fury and irritation. Gaara. Naruto the Kage interrupted, his voice still soft, almost whispering, but it was more than enough for the blonde to shut his mouth. You always ask everybody to believe in you. Now I am the one who is asking you as a friend. Naruto, have faith in us. Please. Go and save yourself. Naruto's eyes flicked to the side. He couldn't stand to meet his friend's eyes, which had always sparkled with power but now looked back at him pleadingly. I won't leave you. Naruto's equally soft and caring voice encompassed their bodies, suppressing the noise of the enormous battle around them. The commander watched him for a long moment with an emotionless face again. I see. In that case, I have one last order for you as the regimental commander of the Allied shinobi forces and a last wish as your friend. Naruto nodded, then a sudden pain reached his weary mind from where his neck connected his skull. Live and get stronger, Hokage-sama. The world slowly faded away from his vision. The last thing he saw was the Godane Kazekage's form standing above him with a sad smile on his face. A small amount of sand slowly whirled back to the giant guard on his back, before he descended into the darkness of unconsciousness. That was the last time he saw him. A slumped figure stood in the thickening rain, gently stroking a giant stone spike, carved by skillful hands into the hard mountainside. Freezing cold rain drops flowed freely down Naruto's face, stabbing his skin like ice needles, mixing with his own warm but silent tears. Darkened eyes ran over the landscape of the empty lands, where 2 days ago Konoha and her people lived their lives inside the slowly growing number of buildings since Pain's attack. However, that which Nagato failed to destroy, they had finished with just one well-aimed Bijudama during their last fight for Suna. With one leap, he hopped down onto the hard surface, ignoring the pain in his ankles. At least it proved that he wasn't dreaming. However, deep down he really hoped that it was all just a nightmare, and that he would wake up in his old apartment. His orbs moved toward the only memorial of his village, the giant mountain with 5 faces carved into its hard surface. An enormous crack ran through the faces of the first and second leader, while the lower half of Sarutobi's face simply disappeared. Maybe he was selfish, but he was still glad that, by some miracle, his father's and Tsunade's faces were untouched by the destruction. Naruto slowly shook his head, and he could feel a crack running through the surface of his own heart. He thought he had developed a sixth sense, that he would feel if something was happening to his beloved village. But he felt nothing when the black ball impacted the center of the village. He didn't even notice during the fight that Konohagakure no Sato was no more, while they fought for Sunagekure no Sato. Nothing left behind. No debris, no ruins, no broken beams, no half-collapsed building, nothing. But thankfully there were also no dead bodies of friends and civilians like on the first battlefield or at Suna. The village hidden in the leaves and most of her people had disappeared from the world's surface silently. Gamakichi, bring me back, please. Naruto's soft whisper filled the empty land around them. The orange toad didn't answer, only nodded, and the 2 figures disappeared from the empty land with a loud puff. The wall shook from impact and a long crack appeared where Naruto's fist connected with it. Dilated crimson-red eyes flamed with an unreadable emotion, while they took in what remained of the allied shinobi forces filling the grounds of Mount Mayaboku. Some of them were on the verge of life and death, while others sat without even a scratch, some eyes burned with pure hatred or determination, while others simply stared unfocused into the nothingness in front of them. How many? His voice was weak and cracking, while Sakura stepped next to him. Maybe 2,000 or 3,000. But thankfully not everyone is here. Some civilians managed to flee from Konoha before the Bijudama strike after they heard what had happened to Suna, and some of them had left even before the Rio fight started. We still have smaller forces here and there beside the survivors from the last battle. Maybe another 1,000. We have around 600 shinobi from Konoha here, the rest are from the other nations. Madara, he knows what he is doing. First he separated the mine, the headquarters, then the sealing team, then Konoha and Suna to dismiss the backup. The other 3 hidden villages were already evacuated just for safety's sake. Most of the civilians dissolved throughout the lands in small groups. Naruto clenched his hands into fists, his nails painfully cutting into the soft flesh of his palm. Sakura let out a weary sigh after sending a concerned look to her teammate. Naruto? The blonde simply shook his head. Prepare the new headquarters with Shikamaru, Darui, and Kakashi. Pa will help you. He won't be able to find us here for a long time. And you? A sad smile appeared on Naruto's face, but his eyes flamed with a new determination. I got an order from Gaara. With this, he simply turned around and left. 2 men occupied the small clearing, their forms gracefully standing amongst the giant plants of Mount Mayaboku. The 2 shinobi suddenly launched toward each other, their movement blurred by their insane speed. Fists connected with palms, rough hits were gracefully swept to the side by a single sweep of an arm. The intense spar continued for an hour, before Naruto almost collapsed on the soft grass of the clearing after a last series of well-aimed strikes. The heavy breathing of the blonde boy filled the clearing, while the Hyuga clan head gave a helping hand for the to get up. You are still too hot-headed. Your attacks become sloppy when you lose self-control. A half-smile appeared on Naruto's fine features. He raised his hand to scratch the back of his head sheepishly, but it collapsed back to his side halfway. In the end the teen shrugged. Hayashi let out a weary sigh and pressed his fingers to several parts on Naruto's arm to reopen the closed points. That's enough for today. Naruto shook his head, his eyes flashing with determination and sheer stubbornness. Not yet. I can take more. The collected Hyuga rubbed the bridge of his nose and swept the sweat from his forehead, then in the end just nodded. The 2 figures jumped backwards immediately, their bodies moving to stance unconsciously before they shot forward once more. Kakashi-sensei? I know you don't like to talk about it, but could you tell me more about Dad and the others? I know almost nothing about your past. About your team. I want to understand why he did it. I want to understand what happened to Obito, and I want to hear more about my parents. The silver-haired Jounin closed his eyes and didn't answer. They sat side by side in the afternoon breeze under the shadow of another world plant on the shore of a meadow, enjoying the sounds of nature around them. Naruto shifted nervously and winced when the movement awakened the pain in his muscles due to his previous training session with Raiden. After 5 minutes in complete silence, Kakashi finally opened his eyes and turned his head toward the cerulean blue sky. I met your father for the first time when I graduated from the academy. He stood at the gates, waiting for me. Black silhouettes stood around a giant table. The new headquarters was filled with the remaining allied shinobi forces. Naruto simply leaned back against the wall. His arms were buried deep inside his pockets, almost perfectly mimicking the common habit of his sensei. His eyes were closed, but his ear was sharp enough to pick up the soft ruffle of the map on the table, the argument amongst the shinobi, the twitch in their heartbeat. The smell of the fresh ink they used to mark spots on the large map in front of them. It was irritating. Naruto let out a sigh and escaped from the cascade of senses into his own mindscape. He stepped inside the seal, while his eyes ran over the drastically changing environment with amusement. The sewer was slowly starting to transform. The dark water had disappeared 2 weeks ago, and he could already see some green spots all over the landscape. Osier trees germinated in the middle, while the pipes were slowly shrouded by a thick jungle of ivy. When I opened the seal, you didn't mention this little side effect, Kurama. The fox shrugged in his mindscape. You don't like the new design? Naruto shook his head. No, it's nice. I'm actually talking about my senses. It's annoying. Deal with it. You should be happy with your sharpened senses. I can't even sleep because of them. You will get used to it in time. Don't complain like a sissy. A furious snort left Naruto's real mouth, and he distantly felt a hand on his shoulder, forcing him out from his mindscape just in time, before he could sink in a deep argument with his fluffy tenant. He opened his eyes and glanced to the side to see the questioning look on Sakura's face. Nothing, just speaking with the furball. Sakura made a nervous smile and settled down next to the blonde boy. I will never get used to it. Naruto shrugged. He is a nice guy, when he's not threatening to tear open my stomach if I do something stupid. Old habits die hard, I think. I would be more concerned about him if he suddenly started to act like a cute puppy. Yeah, a nervous chuckle left Sakura's soft lips. If I can get your attention back there. The irritated voice of Dari reached them, and to Sakura's surprise, they finally moved toward the giant table without any complaint. Naruto. You will lead the first wave with Kitsuchi. The second will be Kakashi's, the third will be me. Suddenly a small toad appeared in the middle of the table, gaining everyone's attention in the room. They spotted him near the remains of Konoha. Dari only nodded, and the small toad immediately hopped down from the desk and left without any further word. It's time for a strike. Shikamaru tapped Naruto's shoulder. Naruto, I need to speak with Kurama. I have an idea for him. Naruto nodded, and in the next second a shadow clone appeared beside him. His azure blue eyes shifted to crimson red, and his features became more animalistic. Come on! Just a little bit more. The blonde teen desperately tried to concentrate fire chakra into his palms, mixing it together with the already small whirling cyclone, together with 3 clones. Boss, it's going to. Before the clone next to him could finish the sentence, the technique broke down, and glowing orange flames grabbed the skin on his hands, stretching around the blonde teen and the environment, destroying everything around them. The storm of fire and razor-sharp wind finally died down around him, leaving only the smoke from the destruction mixed with the chakra-filled smoke of the dispersed clones. He heard a desperate yell and muffled footsteps as someone ran toward him, numbed by the pain from his burned arm. The pain started to die down, the burning sensation replaced with cool, green medical chakra. The blonde finally glanced up to his companion, looking deep inside the angry green eyes. Idiot! You could have killed yourself with that jutsu. The blonde teen didn't answer. He just let her finish what she had already started. 5 minutes later, he straightened himself despite the continuous opposition of the pink-haired girl. Thank you, Sakura. It would be safer if you'd get away from here. You don't think that I'll let you continue, do you? You've been out here for 12 hours and you almost burned your hands to coal. The only answer she received was a determined glance from azure eyes. Hundreds of clones popped into existence with the same determination, and the pink-haired kunoichi backed under a giant tree without a word, after a last sad glance into the flaming blue pools. Uzumaki Naruto lay on his back, his eyes focused on the cerulean sky, with its puffy clouds. It had been 2 months since they made their last attempt to seal away the rogue Uchiha and the 10-tailed beast. The Shinobi alliance was slowly breaking, only a handful of ninjas stayed together, fighting, and then withdrawing, then fighting again against the terror that showed up from time to time together with Madara, who was still looking for him to capture and gain the final nail to the coffin for the Shinobi world and the truth. Thanks to Kami, the 10-tailed beast hadn't been sealed inside Madara. Yet. Without Obito, and with his body being dead, Madara couldn't seal it away. All he could do was summon and control it. That was the only thing restraining Madara and slowing him down. He needed time, and this was their only help against the Uchiha. While he was searching for a way to seal away the beast and also hunting for him, they could act in the shadows and prepare their next attack. But if he figured out a way, found a sealing method which was able to restrain the unstable chakra of the incomplete 10-tailed beast inside his dead body, if that happened they were doomed. The Eye of the Moon plan would succeed, and then the infinite Tsukuyomi would draw everyone into a false world. The blonde teen slammed his fist into the soft soil next to his body. He let out a sigh and raised his hands in front of his head, focusing a small amount of chakra into his thumbs, and watched with an emotionless face as the electricity jumped from finger to finger with a soft chirping. Every offensive attack they used had almost no effect on the 10-tailed beast. Sheer power and stamina weren't enough to take down that monster, and Naruto learned it the hard way. He had spent time on learning other elements to take down that thing, had learned and developed powerful techniques that could easily wipe out a whole village at full power, furthermore combining them with the attacks of Kurama, but it wasn't enough. They just slowed them down for a short period. Nothing was enough against that thing. It didn't matter how many times they killed that damn bastard, thanks to the impure world resurrection he came back like nothing had happened. Madara wasn't a fool, and he knew perfectly well how they could get rid of him. During the first battle, he had taken care of that threat after he erased the command center. He had chased down the sealing teams one by one. They had lost the rare seal masters from Kumo, 2 from IWA, and all from Suna in a blink of an eye by only one powerful attack. The only way was to seal it away, together with Madara. But that damn Uchiha could counter their every remaining sealing method. None of them were powerful enough to contain that amount of power, and those that could be used against him couldn't work because of the complexity of the preparations. The last 2 shinobi from the sealing teams were just users who couldn't develop anything new on their own. There were no more real seal masters left. Naruto ran his fingers along the edge of the giant scroll, which he used as a pillow. He had found it an hour ago, deep in the Toad's library. Maybe it could help them. He let out a defeated sigh, grabbed the scroll and left the shore without a word, when he felt another presence invading his musing. After Naruto left, a lonely figure stepped out from the edge of the otherworld plants, with a worried frown on his face. Sai shook his head and gathered chakra into his limbs to catch up with his teammate. I can't stand this silence. Why hasn't he shown himself since the last attack? That was 2 months ago. Naruto slammed his fist onto the hard table, causing his friends to flinch. Naruto! Ino barked out from behind the table, where she rested her head on her folded arms. She glanced toward Sakura, who only shrugged as a response. What? Naruto turned around and folded his arms in front of his chest, sulking and grimacing like a small kid. The blonde girl only rolled his eyes in irritation. Just when I really started to think you were maturing, Naruto narrowed his eyes and stuck his tongue out toward the girl, but didn't respond. Shikamaru observed his friend for a long silent minute, his obsidian eyes narrowed with concern when he noted the dark circles around the hazed and darkened blue orbs. You didn't sleep yesterday, did you? The blonde boy let out a weary sigh and turned toward the Nara. No. I'm working on something. On what? On a new seal. Sakura made a curious glance toward her teammate. Another barrier? Naruto shook his head. No. Not this time. Then what? Ino had lost her patience and just simply barked out, which reminded everybody of a long-lost comrade and his dog. A small, sad smile appeared on Naruto's face, and it slowly transformed into a wide grin, which sent a cold shiver down Sakura's spine. It had been a long time since she last saw that grin. That fake grin of his. That's a surprise. Naruto turned around and simply left the room without further explanation, but his mask immediately disappeared when he turned his back to his comrades and his foot crossed the doorstep. Sorry everyone, he whispered into the dark night with a weary and weak voice, but his once hazed and darkened eyes sparkled with a new light of determination. Tomorrow it will be over. I promise. Only fiery determination showed in the azure eyes of the young boy. And I don't go back on my word. That is my. You can trust me. You know that, don't you? The girl just nodded. I told you that I'll break the cycle of hatred. I'll break this curse. If there is such a thing as peace, I'll find it. Believe in me. This is my legacy that they left for me. The girl didn't reply. Instead, a small sob escaped from her mouth as she leaned nearer to the boy's chest for comfort. You were always like this, you idiot. You don't have to do everything alone. We're here too. You don't owe the world anything. Don't bear such a burden alone. I'm not doing it alone, Dadabayo. You are here with me. You will always be with me, it doesn't matter what's happening. Just like Erosenin is with me, Tsunade, my parents, all my friends, my comrades. It was their decision. Ino and the others knew what they were planning. It was a foolish plan. Shikamaru should have known that. Naruto murmured, his eyes moved toward the motionless body of Ino. She had tried to control Madara during their last battle. His eyes didn't move for long minutes, and he averted his gaze only when he felt Sakura grip his clothes tight, to glance down to the eyes of his teammate. Promise me, you won't do anything stupid. A small smile appeared on Naruto's face, but it was slowly washed away when Sakura's eyes practically pleaded with him. "Promise me." The blonde eyed the girl for a long silent minute, then nodded. "I promise." Sakura nodded and leaned closer into the warm embrace, and in minutes she drifted into a dreamless sleep, overwhelmed by her exhaustion. Naruto gently picked up the sleeping girl and placed his teammate into the next empty room. Naruto watched the sleeping Sakura for minutes, maybe for hours. He didn't know exactly. His hands gently stroked out a pink stuff from her face, and then he leaned closer, his lips stopping only millimeters from her ears. "I'm sorry, Sakura. I'm going to break my promise. Take care." Naruto straightened himself, and after one last glance he left the room. His steps echoed in the empty passageway, his face was emotionless, only his eyes sparkled with an odd light, while he opened his own room's door and grabbed a small scroll from his desk. He suddenly stiffened. "You are the only one who can still sneak up on me since I got Kurama's senses." Spiky silver locks unfolded from the shadows of a corner, slowly revealing his silhouette centimeter by centimeter as Kakashi slowly walked toward the blonde teen, his hands buried casually inside his pockets. The Jounin didn't speak for a long silent minute, only his visible eye shined with an odd sparkle while he observed the young boy in front of him. A small smile appeared under the textile of his mask when he realized that he didn't have to tilt his head down as much as back then to look into the eyes of his student. "You got taller." A small smile appeared on Naruto's face, but he didn't answer. He surpassed the urge to retort with something harsh. The commander measured his student from head to toe once more, and he had to restrain a flinch when he suddenly realized why he looked so different this time. The azure orb shined with a different flame, a flame that he saw first in the eyes of his own late sensei, when he last saw him on the night before Naruto's birth. Preparing for the worst-case scenario. Dozens of scrolls laid on the floor, already checked, though he still leaned above the last small scroll, memorizing its use in the knowledge of what was going to happen if he used it. What he was going to sacrifice if everything went wrong. He had the same eyes as the time Minato mentally prepared for his death just in case something went wrong. The Jounin's chest squeezed painfully when his eye moved toward the small scroll in Naruto's hand. The whole situation was painfully familiar. Kakashi's lips were suddenly drier than the deserts of Suna in a blink of an eye, and his voice cracked as he whispered. "I know what you are up to, Naruto." The blonde's muscles tensed, but he didn't move from his place. "You want to stop me?" The Jounin shrugged casually and took a step closer and gently freed the small scroll from his student's fingers. However, he actually wanted to scream at him, to just forget his stupid plan. He wanted to punch him in the face to beat some intelligence into his thick head or knock the blonde out to stop him and take his place. However, he didn't do any of that. He instead slowly rolled the small scroll open and took a closer look at the painfully familiar design. "Would anyone be able to stop you?" A half-smile appeared on Naruto's face as he simply grabbed the scroll out of his sensei's hands and buried it deep into his cloak's pocket. "No. I thought that technique perished together with Konoha," Kakashi whispered. "I remade it from my own seal." "And you've modified the design?" "Yes, I have been working on this for a long time. I finished it yesterday, but if I had known what they were up to, then Naruto gathered his thoughts and emotions, and hardened his face. "This form will allow me to use it even if I may." "Will it be enough? To restrain both of them?" Back then it was only able to contain half of the Kyuubi's power. "It will, but only with Kurama's power boost. He will be able to slip out from the seal." Before Naruto shook his head, and then simply continued listing the facts, which oddly calmed him down. "This is the only seal which is capable of it. With the modifications, it acts like a seal tag and not like a ninjutsu as the original technique. The effect will be immediate. And I am the only one who can use it, before you think about something stupid, like trying to knock me out and take my place." A long, weary sigh left Kakashi's lips, muffled by the cloth of his mask, heating his skin under it. "I've always wished you would follow your father's footsteps, but not in a way like this." Kakashi slowly shook his head and they stayed in silence for a long soundless minute, enjoying each other's company in the small room and the gently leaking symphony of the cicadas, crickets, and the fauna. "Why are you here, sensei? Will you try to convince me not to do it?" Kakashi stepped closer, and gentle hands squeezed Naruto's shoulders reassuringly. The edges were rough by the years of fighting, but it still felt softer against his tense muscles than anything he could currently think of. It wasn't a real hug, but it felt even more to the blonde from his restrained teacher. Nope. You are as stubborn as your father and your mother. You won't listen. I just hope I can say a proper farewell this time, Rokudame Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. Kakashi-sensei? Yes? Don't call me that, I'm not. The jounin closed his eyes for a long moment before his eyes turned into a familiar form, hinting at the wide smile under his mask. I decline. Naruto let out a sigh, then with a soft chuckle he turned around to leave. He feared that if he looked at his teacher once more, his determination would crack, but the temptation was too big to bear, and he still glanced back, for one final look. His chest tightened and he lurched back to give one last quick hug to his stunned teacher. Kakashi, first a little hesitantly then warmly, returned it until Naruto took a step back and made a few small steps toward the door. Sensei, his voice was so soft, but still serious, and the smile under Kakashi's mask melted away. Yes? I leave Sasuke to you. Tell him that I'm sorry that I couldn't keep my promise. And tell the others that I'm sorry, and take care. And to never give up. All of you live a happy life. And go find a girl. Have a family. Have lots of children running around in creepy masks. Rebuild Konoha and her pride. Let the will of fire burn again in peace. Hatake Kakashi stood silently, listening to the last words of his student, and when he finished, he made the deepest bow he could manage, and his always collected voice trembled for a moment before it echoed back to him inside the small room. I will, Hokage-sama. He glanced up a moment later in the hope to meet with those azure eyes one more time, but his student was already gone. Naruto glanced at the other side of the valley from the head of the Shodaime, while the waterfall shone with a cold silver glow by the full moon above them. He had sucked in a long breath, freezing his chakra flow for a moment, before he pushed out a huge amount of Kurama's chakra toward the distant lands. He ran through a long chain of hand signs and rolled open a scroll made from fine vellum. With a puff of smoke, a Hittite appeared on the ink-black design on its surface, together with a worn thick orange-colored diary, a copy of Jiraiya's first book and several other belongings of Uzumaki Naruto he held dear. He gently sealed each of the things back into the scroll, after his fingers stroked the surface of a few photographs, silly things like a pressed leaf from Konoha, or the last remaining pieces of Tsunade's necklace. The last memories of long-gone comrades, friends. One last attempt to say goodbye to their memories. When he finished, only one thing remained in his lap. The proud insignia of Konoha glinted in the faint moonlight as he traced a finger gently on the curves of his old date. Naruto looked around and let out a long sigh. His eyes squeezed shut, his teeth clenched, before he finally shook his head. The blonde put the 8 back on the fine surface, and in the next second, it was gone, sealed away again, then put the scroll into one of his pockets. And now what? I already sent out the invitation. He will come. We just have to wait. Are you really sure about this? There must be another way. I'm sure. You will be able to leave my body before I pay the necessary price. Everything depends on your timing. I won't let you die with me. Kurama didn't answer. He'd been oddly silent in the last few days, while they had been traveling to their destination. He forced the fox to promise him that he would escape before the Shinigami strikes. He couldn't endure the loss of one more friend. He settled himself down, and his eyes slowly closed to gather as much energy from the untouched nature around him as he could. You have finally given up? Naruto opened his eyes to reveal his golden orbs with horizontal pupils and glanced toward the Uchiha standing on top of his own stone head, whose expression mirrored the same lack of emotion on the stone replica's face. He tilted his head to the side, observing the calm man in front of him for a long silent moment with curiosity. Why do you think I've given up? The Uchiha folded his arms in front of his chest. You are here. Alone. Either you have given up or you still think after almost 6 months of useless battle that you are able to win against me. A wide, cheeky grin appeared on Naruto's face. The latter, Databao. You've chosen an almost sentimental location. It's fitting. Don't you think? Because this time, you will really die here. You won't even be able to scratch me. Naruto let out a snort and shook his head, but the Uchiha didn't wait for his answer. Madara's form was colored with a golden shade when he gracefully landed in front of Naruto, whose form was already overwhelmed by the golden flames of pure chakra. The giant form of the Susanoo emerged around the Uchiha in the next second, deflecting the attack coming from Naruto in the next blink of an eye. The battle was enormous. Jutsu scarred and shook the landscape around them, just like almost 100 years ago. New mountains rose from an earth release by Madara, while one of Naruto's wind releases cut a new canyon into the ground, diverting the ancient old river to a new direction under their feet. If any living thing was nearby, they would see that despite how hard Naruto struggled to win, the Uchiha simply played with him. It didn't matter how hard he trained, how strong he became. The Uchiha was always a step ahead. Naruto dropped himself to the ground on one knee, and only his heavy breathing could be heard over the scarred lands, while he tightened his grip on the newest enormous wound in his stomach. His golden locks hung freely from his crown. He had lost his 8 long ago. It lay somewhere near, maybe shrouded by debris. I'm impressed. A normal shinobi would already be unconscious after that wound. But it's still useless. You can't win against me. You are wounded and exhausted, while I'm still untouched. Naruto felt his left eye twitch in his irritation, and an unconscious snarl left his lips as he straightened himself one more time. His hand shot forward and released a kunai toward the Uchiha, sharpened with wind chakra, who didn't even bother to duck in his arrogance at seeing the small attempt. He just simply tilted his head to the side, to let the kunai pass. A satisfied smile spread across Naruto's face when the chakra-covered blade suddenly stretched out, drawing a thin red line on the Uchiha's arrogant face. The smile grew into an animalistic grin when the first droplets of crimson liquid slowly flowed down his chin and dropped to the ground with an unnaturally loud splash. Ha! Take that! His only answer was an irritated glare from the man in front of him. Are you ready for a furball? 10 more seconds and we'll have the necessary amount of chakra. Naruto raised his hand to the side, not bothering with the enormous wound on his stomach and the countless cuts and bruises all over his body. A warm sensation filled his insides while his chakra slowly flowed into his palm and a shining electric blue globe appeared in it. His other hand was buried into his pocket, his fingers clenched around the scroll, staining it with his own blood. Then this is farewell to Kurama. Don't forget the right timing. Uzumaki Naruto. Yeah? It was an honor to fight with you. Kurama's voice was oddly weak, almost trembling. The almighty nine-tailed demon fox became sentimental. I'm touched. Nothing else could be heard inside his head. Kurama didn't answer, but it wasn't necessary. He felt no regret, no sorrow, no sadness, and no despair like anybody else would when he was about to offer himself willingly to the death god. He wondered if maybe his father also felt like this before he had done the sealing. The thought of his father filled his mind with happiness. An odd and childish curiosity raised inside his chest. What would the belly of the Shinigami look like? Will he be able to see his father? See Gigi? Suddenly unfitting happiness and joy filled his chest, while his thoughts wandered toward his friends, his family, his comrades, toward all of the people he cared for. It was an honor for me also. Take care, Kurama. He let out a long breath, his mind emptied, his breath and heartbeats slowed down. Only one emotion burned inside his head, flaming with blinding light inside his eyes. Sheer determination. A soft smile appeared on his face. The aching of his wounds, the soreness of his muscles, the sharp pain in his abdomen became distant and dull. I'm sorry, everyone, take care. A soft breeze ruffled his blonde locks, picking up small leaves and dust from the scarred ground, dancing around his body, gently stroking his skin one last time, before carrying away the leaves together with his last words toward distant lands. Unearthly peace encompassed his mind and his soul, like after a warm, caring embrace only which a parent could give to his child. Without thinking, he shot forward with insane speed, gathering all of his own remaining chakra into his feet, and slammed the whirling azure-blue Rasengan toward the Uchiha's chest, while his experienced fingers broke the closing seal on the scroll, before the world around him became black. You eat like every meal will be your last one. Naruto only shrugged in response and took another bite. Kushina dropped another piece of meat onto his plate, and Naruto tucked in, unaware of the blue eyes fixed on his frame as he demolished the meat in 3 bites. The blonde teen let out a satisfied sigh and patted his rounding stomach, leaning back with closed eyes. Much better now, mumbled the young blonde. Hey Toriku. Naruto sneaked a peek from the corner of one opened eye, showing that he was listening. I met with Inoichi and he told me something. Naruto didn't move from his relaxed seat, nor did he react visibly. However, a small hint of worry started to rise inside his chest. He had prepared in advance for this. What did you do with that lily? The teen only shrugged and stayed silent for a long minute before he gathered himself to answer. I brought it to the memorial stone. The Hokage tilted his head a little. His eyes mirrored only curiosity, and fortunately not suspicion. But it was Kushina who asked the question that had instantly popped up in the Hokage's head. Why? Kushina's voice was full of curiosity and confusion as it echoed in the empty dining room of the Hokage mansion. The teen only shrugged, his face oddly unreadable. When he had visited the memorial stone, he had mourned for his lost friends. But right now, they would stay that way, even if he had to go through hell for them. There was no more need for mourning. They were breathing, living or growing inside their mother's tummy. He would never forget them. He would never forget everything they had done for him. He shifted nervously on the floor, then suddenly hopped onto his feet, grabbed a paintbrush, and threw it at his father with a cheeky smile in an attempt to change the subject. Lunch break is over. And don't forget, I want my room in orange. It wasn't a fair win. You still can't do it without your clones, Minato complained. Naruto shrugged and moved to the side to lean against the kitchen counter. I learned it, didn't I? And it works. So I won. Minato's frustrated snort echoed inside the empty dining room, and he straightened himself from the floor and grabbed the bucket of the vibrant orange paint with angry, narrowed eyes. Kushina, remind me in the future to never, ever make a bet with Toraku again. Laughter filled the room in the next second, and the Hokage couldn't help himself. After a short second of silent sulking, he joined in, his annoyance instantly melting away when Naruto's warm laugh surpassed everyone's voice. However, Minato's blue eyes traveled toward his brother from time to time. A worried look appeared on the face of the Hokage of Konohagaku no Sato, as he leaned over a scroll and tapped his chin continuously with the soft brush. He hummed, lost in thought, then let out a sigh. That was the moment when another blond man appeared in the open window, sticking his golden head inside the Hokage tower. His mouth was open to speak, but when he caught sight of the worried look on his father's face, he simply closed it and hopped down in front of his leader, eyeing him for a long silent moment with tilted head. I don't like that expression on your face. Minato just waved a hand and leaned back against his carved chair to fix his eyes on the ceiling. Just some village business. Naruto raised a curious eyebrow, his eyes fixed on Minato, who in the end finally opened his mouth to speak. We are having trouble with the ranking process. During the war, we made on-field promotions, but we still have potential genin who need to be tested. We need to hold a chunin selection, but we don't have enough genin for a proper assessment. I'm afraid they'll have to wait one more year until more students graduate from the academy and gain the necessary experience to participate. A small chuckle left Naruto's mouth, earning a pointed look from his father. This is a serious problem, you know. This could reduce morale amongst the genin. Naruto waved a hand dismissively. I don't think so. Let's just resurrect an old practice. Invite the other nations and you will get enough participants. I'm sure the Kazekage will be eager to send some teams to show off their skills to the Wind Daimyo. Minato tilted his head a little, observing his younger brother for a long moment with an unreadable expression on his face. You think Inoki and the Reikage will just send genin teams to Konoha when we've just won a war against them? Normally it would be years until the first shared exam. Maybe even a decade or more. Naruto only shrugged. Who knows? Invite all 5 Kage as well. I'm sure all of the villages are in the processes of regrouping and restoration, so all of them need extra income. They'll have to demonstrate their power if they are to get new customers, and the best time for that is a good old Chunin exam where clients are gathered in one place. Naruto casually explained his point, whispering a silent thank you to Sarutobi, who had explained the exam's real purpose to him. It would open so many possibilities if the 5 Kage met in this timeline. The idea is good even if it came from you, but I would absolutely argue with the timing. Low profile, you know, low profile. Naruto sends a mental shrug toward his never-missing companion, earning an irritated groan from Kurama. The time traveler locked eyes with ones of identical color, looking for any hint to the thoughts behind those blue orbs. In the end, Minato only shrugged and made a contemplative face. It was years before the Third Shinobi War since we've last held a proper Chunin exam, that is true. And maybe having one now would bring the younger generations closer together. However, I'm worried about the other nations. Most of them hold a grudge against Konoha, and that could pose a high risk to the village. However, maybe you know what? I'll consider it. A wide and satisfied grin appeared on Naruto's face. Success. Naruto glanced down at the scroll in his hands after sending another suspicious glance toward his father. He was wearing that cunning grin again, and he couldn't help but worry about the thing in his hands. He moved his gaze downward and started to scrutinize the closed scroll with wary eyes, like it could attack him or bite off his hands at any moment. What is this? Your next assignment. It will be a long-term mission. 3 months long to be exact. Naruto raised an eyebrow and slowly rolled the scroll open, running his eyes over its content. When his brain finally processed the contents, his eyes widened and his mouth fell open, his mind already desperately starting to look for excuses he could use, but only Kakashi's silly ones came to mind. Kurama's snicker echoed inside his mind. That's going to be interesting. We reap as we sow, isn't that right, Naruto? No way in hell I'm going to accept this mission. The sly grin remained on the leader's face. It's your choice. This, or D-ranked missions for an equivalent time period. Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously, his mind jumping between anger and disbelief. That's blackmailing, Databeo. Sarutobi Hiruzen's soft chuckle filled the room in the next second as he looked at his successor with an amused expression on his face. Indeed, that is blackmailing, Minato-kun. The yellow flash only shrugged and leaned back in his seat confidently. This or D-ranked missions. It's not blackmailing. I'm simply giving you 2 options to choose from. Naruto slowly shook his head in his defeat, and an almost animalistic groan left his mouth as he burrowed his face in his palms. His voice was muffled by his hands, but it still cracked with irritation. I hate you. The Hokage only shrugged again and a satisfied smirk appeared on his face. Then it's decided. Welcome to the ranks of the Chunin exam supervisors. The first 2 months are mostly about preparations and diplomacy. That won't fully occupy your time, so you will still receive other missions during this period until the exam starts. I hate you, Naruto mumbled onto the fine paper as he rested his forehead on the long letter he had just finished writing inside the Hokage office. That had been the last invitation letter, thankfully, which would be sent to the Tsuchikage by a small delegation tomorrow morning. You are going to mess up the ink, and then you'll have to start over. An irritated groan left Naruto's mouth, and he finally straightened himself, revealing a small ink smudge on his nose. A soft chuckle filled the room immediately, and Minato pointed toward his own nose to show that he had been right. Naruto rubbed his stained nose hard with narrowed eyes, continuously mumbling curses toward his father. Don't you have a secretary for these kinds of things? I do, but her calligraphy by no means matches your skill. Naruto rolled his eyes, but a small amount of pride formed inside his chest at the compliment. He did work hard on ingraining those damn symbols into his fine motor muscles for countless hours. Okay, it wasn't him, mostly his clones, but still. Receiving the memories of over 1,000 boring hours was, for him, equal to a torture session with the Biki. His mind traveled back to the events at Kusa, and a frown crawled on his face. He hadn't gotten any information about Katsuchi since they had returned from Suna. His blue orbs flashed with concern and he hesitantly turned toward Minato. Who will bring the invitation to the Tsuchikage? Minato didn't look up from the paper stack in front of him as he answered. You want to know when I will free Katsuchi, don't you? Well, yes. He will leave tomorrow morning, together with the other delegations. I thought it would be a sign of goodwill if he was the one to hand over the invitation. A satisfied smile appeared on Naruto's face as his only answer. Hey Katsuchi Ajisen! A blonde teen jumped into the circle of ANBU around the 4 foreign shinobi, earning some irritated glances from the already tense guards and surprised looks from the IWA fighters. The named giant narrowed his eyes, observing the newcomer with a frown on his face while the kunoichi next to him couldn't restrain her trembling muscles, shaking with fury and the urge to attack. The commander raised his arm in front of the woman and stepped in front of Naruto. What do you want? The teen locked his hands behind his neck and a bright smile appeared on his face. Nothing, I just came to say goodbye. The kunoichi raised an eyebrow and shouted. Why the hell would you do that? To show you are superior? Naruto furrowed a confused brow. Superior? Why would I do that? The kunoichi let out a furious snort, her eyes still flamed with hatred, but a glance from her commander immediately silenced her. What do you want, Odoroki Torika? A wide grin appeared on the teen's face as he stepped closer and raised his right hand toward the stunned commander and halted it in midair. Kitsuchi narrowed his eyes, observing the offered hand for a long silent minute, waiting for the boy to finally drop it, but his eyes mirrored only determination and nothing more. His hand moved almost unconsciously toward the outstretched hand, but paused before they could make contact. Why are you doing this? We kidnapped you. We tried to kill you. Naruto only shrugged, his hand never moving from its place. What's past is past, you can't change it, but you can try to build something better for the future. Suddenly an amused expression appeared on his face, like he was stunned by a joke that only he could understand. His expression finally settled on his face as a soft smile. So, will you fall with me? Will you be the next to fall in the domino chain? The commander eyed him for another long, silent and tense second as he remembered distant conversations about dominoes and change, but an amused snort left his mouth in response as he finally grabbed the hand in front of him to finally shake it. You really are insane. A cheeky smile appeared on Naruto's face as an obvious answer. Yes, he is. Insane and suffering from a serious hero complex. Naruto turned his head to send an annoyed look toward the slowly approaching Minato. The Hokage stepped inside the circle and nodded toward the commander, who mimicked his greeting with a cold expression. Kitsuchi-san, here is the invitation letter we were talking about. Despite what happened before, we are still looking forward to seeing Genin from IWA part in the exams. The commander only nodded again and turned around to finally leave the village after an almost 1-month-long stay in its hospitality. They stepped through the gates, together with the ANBU squad who would escort them until they reached the borders. An unconscious sigh of relief left his mouth when they were finally far enough from the gates. A cheerful yelp still reached them from behind. See you later at the Chunin exams. And don't forget to bring Anokijiji with you. Anokijiji? The kunoichi raised an amused eyebrow and glanced back at the still waving teen. Interesting shinobi, isn't he? Kitsuchi's deep voice forced the woman out from her thoughts as she nodded her answer unconsciously, before her mind drifted back to the teen. Naruto leaned over a blank scroll, stretching out his arms in front of him. He grabbed a small jug and a kunai to mix his blood with the black ink for a new barrier seal he was about to do. He made a small slice on one of his thumbs and raised it above the jug to let blood flow freely into it, but after one small crimson droplet, the flow suddenly stopped. Naruto frowned and repeated the process, but the small cut was almost immediately gone as soon as the blade left his thumb. The blonde let out an irritated groan, and sank into his mindscape to face the snickering fox. You've got a very wicked sense of humor. Stop healing me! Another animalistic snicker echoed inside his mindscape, and he was pushed out from it by a small flick of an enormous rolled his eyes while repeating the process again only to gain just another drop of his crimson red blood before the small cut disappeared from his thumb. Naruto exploded in the middle of his room. Forgetting himself, he shouted out a long loud oath, mustering his entire colorful vocabulary. He was on the verge of tearing out his own shiny golden locks, when the door swung open and a concerned-looking redhead peeked inside the room. The blond boy froze between two words and scratched his cheek in his embarrassment. Sorry, I accidentally kicked the table. Kushina only slowly shook her head and rolled her eyes, the ruby-red locks following her movement gracefully in the air. Geez, you are a shinobi who manages to leave without a scratch from a spar with Minato, and you are going to limp for a day because the table attacked you. Naruto only made an annoyed shrug and watched as his mother shook her head one more time before closing the door behind herself. The blonde teen let out a weary sigh and sat down next to the name table once again. One more prank like this and I will arrange a karaoke night in my mindscape just for you. Naruto couldn't see, but he still felt as Kurama grimaced and winced in his mindscape. I'm bored. Occupy yourself as you always do, don't let me work. What are you doing anyway? You already made at least a dozen barrier tags. I'm doing this so we don't have to worry about people seeing us training. It will mask your chakra so we can train together. So you will let me out? Only if you let me finish it. If anyone recognizes your chakra, we'll be in big trouble. A wide smirk appeared on the fox's face. That will be fun. I'm going to tear you into small pieces. Naruto rolled his eyes. Their relationship had morphed into something you could call a real friendship, but Kurama was still the nine-tailed demon fox, and sometimes his old personality broke through despite their new bond. Just like with Sasuke before the Chunin exam. They had gotten along very well, but he still behaved like a bastard sometimes. Naruto let out another weary sigh when the memory of his old friend popped up again in his head. Thoughts of him broke through the barrier he had made to barricade himself from his old life. During their first fight with the Jubi, he had sensed him near Konoha. He hadn't realized it during the battle, only when they had retreated to Suna. But when he started to look for his friend while in the desert, he couldn't find him anymore. As if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. He didn't think he was dead. He would never think that. Something or someone somehow locked him away from his Sannin mode, just like Madara had done this time and back then. Hey Kurama. Don't you think they are somehow connected? The fox narrowed his eyes while he thought about the possibilities. Maybe. The Biju shrugged and didn't make any other comment. He simply closed the conversation, and bedded himself under the trees to take a nap. You are a big help. Naruto let out a sigh, grabbed the kunai once more to finally start work on the seal, and slammed the invisible door close in front of the memories of his raven-haired teammate. Two shinobi stood straight and tense inside a large office, facing a short, almost childlike man, who read the scroll with an emotionless face. His eyes narrowed when he finished reading, and he finally moved his gaze toward the two ninja in front of him. Tell your Hokage that Kiri will participate in the exams. The leaf Kunoichi nodded, acknowledging his answer, and waited patiently for further words. I will attend the finals. A small satisfied smile appeared on the mostly stern face of the Kazekage. His gaze was fixed on the slowly whirling sand on the horizon, where the two shinobi from Leaf had departed an hour ago with his answer. He was more than glad to show Suna's growing strength to new clients and to the Wind Daimyo. The almost unnoticeable sound of rustling soft textile reached his ears, and his satisfied smile turned into a warm and caring one. His eyes immediately softened when his wife stepped inside the room with an unbelievably small sleeping baby in her arms. Karura slowly swept a small auburn tuft away from the small child's forehead, and the Kazekage's thoughts wandered toward a certain young blonde man. He silently whispered his gratitude into the soft wind of the desert in the hope that it would carry his thoughts to the land of fire. Old and wrinkled skin moved as the third Tsuchikage narrowed his eyes when he finished rereading the scroll his commander and relative had given him only minutes ago for the second time. Thoughts raced inside his head, looking for traps and opportunities. His old eyes moved toward Kitsuchi, who stood still in front of him, waiting for his order. Why on earth would IWA participate in this show-off? Kitsuchi tilted his head to the side, looking for an answer in his own mind, then in the end only shrugged. I don't think they intended this to be a show-off. They need more commissions, so does our village. If we don't participate, they will earn a great advantage by showing their forces to the clients. The leader raised an eyebrow and let out a doubtful and annoyed snort, but his mind already started to hover around new clients and a possibly larger income. I really think we should participate. Furthermore, I advise you to also attend the finals. A grimace appeared on the leader's wrinkled face. So be it. But there is no way I'm going to set foot into Konoha unless it's for a direct invasion. Then please allow me to escort the genin teams. The Tsuchikage narrowed his eyes as he observed his companions suspiciously. Were you brainwashed or what? You hate those tree huggers. You were their captive for a month, and now you are telling me you want to go back? The commander stayed silent for a long moment before he finally answered. I really believe they are seeking peace with us and with the other nations. I was convinced of this during my captivity. I still hate them, but I want to make sure of something for myself. Kitsuchi's eyes became foggy and unfocused, his thoughts wandering toward a certain blonde shinobi, while his leader observed him with narrowed eyes. Make sure about what? The commander hesitated again before he eventually gave his answer. That I have the courage to forgive and to fall. The leader raised a curious eyebrow. Forgive whom? Konoha? They won the war, should we forgive them? Why should you of all people forgive them? We will win the next war, and we will wipe out their existence from even the history books. Kitsuchi slowly shook his head, an unreadable expression appearing on his mostly stern features. In war, there are no winners. Only survivors. The Tsuchikage narrowed his wrinkled eyes and watched silently as his commander left the room without any further words. A furious snort echoed all around the room as an enormous chakra spike sent shivers down the attendants' spines. Two shinobi with a leaf 8 shifted on their legs uncomfortably while a muscular man clenched his right hand until his joints became white, restraining himself with every nerve not to smash something in his annoyance. So Leaf wants to demonstrate power? So be it. Tell your Hokage that Kyuma will participate. One of the Leaf shinobi nodded, and after a hesitant moment, he opened his mouth. We are glad you accepted the offer of Reikage-sama. Kanohigaku no Sato and Yandame-sama are also hoping for your personal attendance during the finals. The shinobi made a deep bow, not aware that the Kage's eye twitched with irritation. The Kage opened his mouth to speak, but a voice behind him interrupted his effort. Is the young man very similar to your Hokage still alive? The Leaf shinobi slowly and hesitantly spoke after he shared a quick glance with his companion. Yes, Bisama. Toriko-san is very much alive. A wide and satisfied grin appeared on the man's face behind the Reikage. Great. I want to speak with him. The Reikage narrowed his eyes, observing the man who was his brother in every way but blood next to him for a long silent second. And you think I will let you go there alone, B? His only answer was a grin from the Minato narrowed his eyes when he reached a giant glowing purple barrier, blocking their sight and senses from the inside while Kakashi jumped down next to him from a branch. Where is Jiraiya? Kakashi shrugged. He mentioned something about research before he left. The Hokage rolled his azure eyes and examined the barrier with increased curiosity. How long has he been inside? For 2 hours, sensei. He didn't let me in. He said he wanted to try something big. The Hokage narrowed his eyes and stepped closer to the barrier. When his experienced hands reached its surface and channeled some chakra into the closing seal, the purple barrier didn't disappear or let him in like he first thought it would. Minato frowned and made a wondering face, but in the end he only shrugged, and a cheeky smile ran across his features before he disappeared with a flash of his golden locks. Naruto let out a long breath with closed eyes, before he opened them slowly and glanced toward his opponent opposite him inside the barrier, observing his actions calmly. The clone with shining red eyes, dilated pupils and widened whisker marks on his cheeks stiffened when his opponent's eyes transformed into a shade of gold. His pupils altered, but without the orange markings around his eyes. 2 clones popped into existence next to him. The clone currently controlled by Kurama grinned, his canines sticking out under his lips, twisting his face into a feral expression. Naruto grimaced at his own animalistic image, and nodded toward the clones beside him. Chakra gathered inside his hand while the other clones started to mix their own chakra into the jutsu. The Rasengan in his palm first shined with an orange light from the fire chakra, before almost immediately brightening into blinding pure white when the wind chakra also mixed into the whirling orb. It didn't change the form. This time he only manipulated the nature of chakra he mixed into it. The 2 clones disappeared when they finished their jobs. Naruto felt a tug outside the barrier, but he had already started moving. It was too late to stop now. In the next blink, he threw the chakra ball toward the still grinning clone at the other side of the barrier-enclosed space, but his eyes widened with shock when another figure appeared behind the suddenly frozen Kurama. Minato's eyes widened when he turned his head and was faced with an attack sweeping right toward his head only a meter away, overwhelming his vision and his other senses. By pure instinct he immediately grabbed the clone, a split second before the ball of chakra exploded and the 2 figures disappeared inside the burning inferno. A smoking man landed harshly behind Naruto's back with a loud moan, together with the still-stunned Kurama, but the clone dispersed as soon as it made connection with the hard soil, filling the air with smoke. A relieved sigh left Naruto, together with the last remains of nature chakra, before he finally turned around to face his panting father sitting on the ground, his eyes still wide, staring in front of himself with a blank expression, his body overwhelmed by the sudden rush of adrenaline. Minato slowly gathered himself and rose from the ground to send a pointed and very angry glare toward Naruto. The purple barrier suddenly wobbled and vanished like it had never been there. Kakashi slowly shook his head and let out a long sigh, then jogged into the center, where 2 blondes loudly argued over something, the edge of the Hokage's white robe still smoking a little. Are you out of your mind? You could have blown everything up. It was your own damn fault. You were the one who just appeared right in the middle of the attack behind my shadow clone. Did you even think about why I might have put up that damn barrier? A small hint of panic leaked from his voice when a dangerous snarl and a proper amount of killing intent left the Hokage, freezing Naruto in his movement. However, the feeling was gone in the next moment, as the yellow flash shook off his sudden anger. What the hell was that anyway? A frown appeared on Minato's face when he touched his scorched, half-missing right eyebrow. That was a two-element combo I'm currently working on. Naruto shifted his gaze to observe his scorched eyebrow and burst out laughing. Hey! Nice new design! I'm sure your fangirls will love that. A muffled chuckle escaped behind Kakashi's masked mouth when his one visible eye also locked on the remains of his once teacher's eyebrow. The expression disappeared from Minato's face in the next second before he folded his arms in front of his chest. He watched the hysterically laughing teen and narrowed his eyes when he noticed the restrained laugh of his student. D-ranked missions for the next week. It was too much for Kakashi, seeing Naruto's sudden change in expression. He burst out with a barking snicker at the Chunin's wide eyes and gaping mouth, but the Hokage's stern voice and emotionless face directed at him immediately froze the laugh inside his body. You too. Sensei. But I didn't do anything. A cocky smile spread across the Kage's face as he shrugged off the complaint and the childish whining of his always collected student. You were laughing. Minato glanced toward his still gaping other blonde companion with a cold expression. Toriku. Briefing about the exam in 3 hours, in my office. Be there. With this last stern and emotionless statement, the Hokage disappeared from the field with a flash of his golden locks, leaving behind nothing other than two still shocked and gaping teens. Naruto's eyes were locked onto the spot where his father had disappeared from for a long silent minute, before his limbs slowly started to tremble, his eyes narrowing until only small slits were visible from his azure blue eyes, and he shouted out, "This means war, you got that?" Like he can hear you, Kakashi muttered under his breath, his arms folded across his chest. Naruto gripped the arm of the Jounin and dragged him away from the clearing, continuously mumbling something incoherent, until he finally found his voice. You go and get pink paint. I'll go and get the Jounin didn't listen, eventually succeeding in shrugging himself free from the blonde's grip and returning to his previous posture. No way in hell. I won't take part in this. Naruto raised an eyebrow while he leaned down to face the young Jounin. Are you a scaredy cat? Jounin Hatake Kakashi? What about your reputation? Are you just going to chicken out from this? The named teen narrowed his eyes, but in the end only nodded. If you do what I think you are planning to do, we will be doomed to D-rank missions for the rest of our lives and not for just a week thanks to you again. I won't participate. If you even touch his coat, he will skin you alive. Naruto folded his arms in front of his chest and turned away from his companion to silently sulk over his betrayer. Finally, it was Kurama's voice inside his head that kicked him out from his thoughts of vengeance. Do you think he sensed me? Or your senjutsu? Naruto shook his head. I don't think so. He was too preoccupied with evading the attack. I didn't think someone would just teleport into the middle of the barrier. His stomach started to rumble, and a smile appeared on his face. I think we deserve some ramen after this training, don't you think, Kurama? The named fox only rolled his giant crimson eyes. The blonde Chunin moaned in his satisfaction as the hot soup slid down on his throat, warming up his body from the inside out until it reached even his toes. He picked up the pink fish cake with his chopstick, and it disappeared into the endless pit that was his stomach with another groan, while the toad only rolled his eyes next to him. Ramen. The meal of gods, especially after a hard training session. It's easy to satisfy your needs. One bowl of ramen and you're in heaven. Naruto sent a cheeky smile toward his teacher and turned back to his steaming bowl. Not like your needs are all that complicated either, you old pervert. Jiraiya snorted and turned toward the other end of the counter to continue trying to sneak a peek under a woman's clothes. There is nothing more satisfying than the sight of a perfectly curved female body. Yeah, especially if the named woman is blonde with big boobs, not to mention deadly. Naruto muttered between two bites. Fortunately, Jiraiya was too preoccupied with the discreet flash of cleavage from the brunette at the other end of the counter. What was that? Nothing, Naruto muttered with a full mouth before he swallowed the last remains of his meal and stretched his arms behind his head. What will we do tomorrow? Jiraiya finally averted his eyes from the woman's chest to meet Naruto's. Minato told me something about D-rank missions for you and Kakashi, but I dismissed it. We'll get a day off. A relieved sigh left Naruto. Thank Kami, I didn't think he was being serious. What did you do to him? He didn't want to tell me. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Let's just say that I burned his dignity a little bit. Jiraiya raised a curious eyebrow and waited for him to continue. He used his stupid Hiraishin to invade my barrier, and he appeared behind my clone when I was trying out a new attack. I literally burned most of his right eyebrow off accidentally. Jiraiya burst out in a fit of laughter for a long while until he finally composed himself. A small shake-up never hurt anyone. Even the strongest person could be in trouble if he let his guard down at the wrong moment. A sour half-smile appeared on Naruto's face. Yeah. Jiraiya got up from his seat and tapped his shoulder. Come on, Gaki, I've got some business. Will you accompany me? I want to finish some things before the briefing. Naruto nodded and followed the Toad Hermit along the streets of the village. He'd already figured out their destination. They'd used the same path 100 times when Jiraiya headed for some research at the bathhouses. A nostalgic feeling filled his chest. He had always enjoyed these moments with the old man, just walking beside each other silently, just the two of them. It always reminded him of the old times, when they wandered around Fire Country, in Konoha, or in any foreign city. Hey Gaki! Jiraiya's voice snapped him out from his musing, and only his reflexes prevented a new bruise on his cheek as he grabbed a scroll flying straight toward his face. Hey! What the hell were you thinking? The Sannin chuckled and waved a hand. You seemed lost in your thoughts, so I thought I should shake you up a little. Couldn't you poke me instead or something? Naruto's mumble died down suddenly when he realized what was in his hand. The soft surface of fine vellum rested inside his palm like a lover, and the unnoticeable amount of his own chakra pulsed faintly from inside the closing seals, together with the rhythm of his heartbeat. He glanced down at his hand, and his surprise melted into anger. Explain. Now. You stole it. Naruto's voice was oddly imperious and commanding, something he gained during the Fourth Shinobi War. Strangely, Jiraiya immediately straightened himself unconsciously and opened his mouth to answer, but when he realized his actions after a moment, he instantly shook his head to ease away the urge to explain himself like he did something wrong, or he had to report something. It was odd. He sounded just like Minato. In the end, he only shrugged to dismiss his sudden guilt and started walking to break the tension. Minato asked me to check it out for him, just after I had arrived. So I took it. Naruto frowned. That was almost 4 months ago. He had completely forgotten about his scroll. A soft, almost invisible smile appeared on his face when he traced his fingers along the edges of it, but it was almost immediately replaced with a troubled frown again. Jiraiya had stolen it from his cupboard where he had hidden it. Since that time, he hadn't even thought about it. Not even when they moved to the Hokage mansion. He was sure he couldn't open it now. If he got it back now, that could only mean one thing, but he had to be sure. You couldn't open it either. More a statement than a question. Jiraiya only shrugged once more. The first layer is a simple blood seal. Minato could probably open it, after all he is a close relative of you. That seal isn't so complicated that it could tell you apart from a very close relative. Naruto just stared back at his sensei. His previous anger immediately disappeared, and he was now hanging on to his every word. He was about to receive some proper feedback about his work, and not just sheer and harsh critique like before on his barriers. The second layer requires your own chakra signature. It's just a standard one. The third is much trickier. It requires some kind of manipulated chakra, an elemental chakra maybe, or a mixed one, but as with all of your seals, it's confusing. It reminds me of something, but Jiraiya's sudden sharp glance stabbed him like a knife for a second, as if he was staring into his very soul. The third layer required Kurama's and his own mixed chakra. It couldn't be that he recognized it, could it? If he recognized it, we would be surrounded by ANBU and suppressor seals and not walk on the path, idiot. But what? Nothing, just a silly idea. Jiraiya only waved a hand dismissively. The fourth layer is another interesting one. The existence of a specified summoning contract. Jiraiya glanced at him once more, this time his eyes only shined with curiosity. Have you tried to summon anything since you came here? Naruto shook his head instantly as a reply, maybe a little bit too fast, while Jiraiya hummed in response with a wondering face. He hadn't tried it since he got stuck in this timeline. If he had, and it was successful, There was no way he could explain how he was able to do that without signing the contract, and if it failed, he feared that the toads would know that someone had tried a summoning. He didn't know enough about summoning contracts to risk it. Of course, it would be useful if he could use the toads, but the risk was too high. Based on the design, I would say the necessary contract should be the toad contract. Naruto froze in place, his eyes bulging from his skull in an unnatural way. Shit. He didn't dare to blink, or breathe, he just waited for Jiraiya to continue, and thankfully he didn't turn back to see his shocked face. When he finally did so, Naruto's mask of utter shock was replaced with real curiosity. Well, this option is impossible, because I have the only existing toad contract and it doesn't contain any new names. At this time, only Minato and I are toad summoners, nobody else. It's also impossible for you to have made one of your own. The toads assured me that they know their every summoner, and they don't know you. But I would still say that your contract is very similar to my toad's. Jiraiya hummed again, lost in his thoughts. Then he started walking again, a little slowly, waiting for him to catch up. He glanced back at Naruto, observing him curiously while he started his next sentence. A kind of amphibian or reptile. A frog maybe, or a salamander. Something that likes wet weather like rain, don't you think? Naruto only shrugged, not getting what he was referring to or what he wanted from him, and Jiraiya's disappointed expression didn't help him either. That didn't trigger anything, did it? Naruto made an odd grimace of perfect confusion, until he finally realized what his once-teacher was mumbling about. You mean those déjà vu feelings? No, nothing like that. Jiraiya let out a sigh and scratched his crown in a way Naruto had seen countless times when Jiraiya was disappointed. It's a shame. Will you humor me? Jiraiya only ignored him and continued, making it obvious that he didn't want to reveal any of his thoughts or theories to him. The fifth layer Gaki, you were insane when you made that seal. Who the hell would put a trap on a closing seal? Naruto only raised an eyebrow as an answer, not trusting in his own voice. Minato told me that you also weren't able to recognize it. With none of your other knowledge damaged, it indicates that this seal has a meaning for you, something from your memories. But this trap seal, it was familiar to me. It took me a lot of effort to finally realize why. I saw it only once, a long time ago, on the main entrance of Mount Myoboku. Naruto just stared back at with a blank expression on his face. He was beyond shocked. Too shocked to move his face muscles, and too shocked to suppress his emotions. He copied that trap exactly from that entrance. It would detect the intruder's will, and if he found anything malignant it would trigger. Jiraiya observed him with scrutinizing eyes. If it weren't impossible, I would say that you are a toad summoner, and that you've already visited Mount Myoboku. We are going to try out something. Your old perverted teacher is smarter than I gave him credit for. Naruto only nodded his head as an answer to both of them, his face fortunately still controlled from mirroring his shock. What do you want to try out? The hand signs are boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram. Bite your finger before you do it, and smear some of your blood on your palms, and after the signs slam your hands onto the ground with an equal amount of chakra for 1 Kage Bunshin. Naruto just stared, exactly like he had in the last 10 minutes, while his mind froze for a second before it started to spin crazily from the upcoming panic. This is going to be interesting. Shut up and help me, shit, what should I do? Naruto felt as the fox shrugged in his mindscape, and after a second of consideration he finally answered. Go with the flow. Hell if I know what will happen. It would be worse if you refused to do so. If you manage to summon a toad, we will confess. Naruto made a hesitant step backwards to gain some space, raised his hand slowly, and took a long time to stare down at it. In the end he shrugged and shook off his rising panic. He sucked in a long breath, raised his thumb toward his pointed canine to make a small cut, and smeared the blood on his palm with the ease of an experienced summoner. Jiraiya observed his every action carefully. Every movement was automatic, and screamed experience even when he ran through the hand signs and slammed his palm onto the hard surface with enough force to push the necessary amount of chakra into the seal array, but not enough to bruise his flesh. His muscle memory was perfect on how to execute the technique to call a smaller summon. Naruto watched with a bated breath as the ink-black marking of the summoning technique spread across the ground like a spiderweb, the familiar pattern forcing a small smile on his face, before it all disappeared into a chakra-filled smoke. He didn't dare to blink, not even to let out the breath he had been holding in since he bit his thumb, waiting with muscles tense to their breaking point for the smoke to finally clear away. Everything seemed so slow now, the mere second it took for the smoke to clear felt like an hour. Finally, the air in his lungs left his chest together with a sigh as the smoke dispersed, and he stared down at empty ground. He slowly glanced up toward his once sensei, who was staring down at the spot where a toad should be, a grimace on his face. Well, that is unexpected. Apparently your name was erased from the summoning contract. Jiraiya made one more disappointed scowl, before continuing, it seems then your scroll will stay closed. I talked to Pa, he said that the seal on the entrance was developed by the first toad summoner, and that it could be that he passed this knowledge to someone. He moved to aim before he died. Jiraiya shrugged casually, then glanced up at the sun. Anyway, I don't think it contains an attack or something dangerous. It's a fine piece, with intarsia and made from vellum, so I think it contains some personal stuff. I made a similar one when I was your age. I stored my precious materials and pictures there. Naruto grimaced. In both amusement and in disgust. He could only imagine what kind of precious materials and pictures Erosenin had when he was a teenager with rampaging hormones. But he was right. He glanced down at his hand and squeezed the scroll a little bit, before burying it deep inside his pocket. It was Pa who had once told him about Jiraiya's old habit of storing his precious things in a special scroll. So he made one of his own to store his own precious things in. The last tangible remains and relics from his old life, pictures of old friends who'd survived the Fourth Shinobi War, were sealed inside the scroll. Some other photos, gathered from here and there, the aid he got from Irika, and finally, a thick orange notebook containing pieces from his life, training plans, sketches of new seals, and it sometimes also functioned as a diary or a memoir. Or something along those lines, where he could extract his troubled thoughts during the long and sleepless nights. It was also something Pa suggested that he do. I think you should take it back home. We've still got almost an hour before the briefing starts. We will meet there. Naruto only nodded, almost automatically, lost in his thoughts and still under the effects of the happenings before. He stepped into the office at the exact time Minato had ordered, his eyes wandering toward the audience sitting next to his father, the stoically puffing Sandaime, the grinning Jiraiya, the three personal advisors of the Hokage. He stepped next to a familiar shinobi after a bow toward them. Naruto grinned at Makoto, dressed completely in black, and a smile forced its way onto the face of the middle-aged interrogator when their eyes met for a moment. And now that the last of the main examiners has arrived, we can finally start the briefing. Naruto winced when his father's stern voice reached his ears, but when he turned and faced his father, he had to mask the chuckle that threatened to explode from him with a cough as he noted the thin layer of chakra surrounding his seemingly now whole and shiny right eyebrow. A henge. Minato dangerously narrowed his eyes and Naruto immediately became silent. Sorry. The Hokage nodded and turned his attention toward the others. I have already received answers from every country. All of them will send teams, and it seems we can count on at least 40 genin squads. Someone cleared his throat, and Minato closed his eyes and let out a frustrated sigh before he turned toward the source with a straight face. If you would like to make a comment, please feel free to share your thoughts with us. I already stated my point of view, but I will remind all of you once again. We are just out of war and you are risking the security of the village with this exam. Especially by entrusting a new recruit without any background information with this event. Naruto narrowed his eyes, but when he turned his head toward the man, eyeing his appearance curiously, he found that he didn't recognize him. But he didn't miss the old man's sharp glare toward him. Minato glanced back with an emotionless face and folded his fingers under his chin to rest his head on them. I appreciate your concern for the village's welfare, Danzo-san, but the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the details of the exam. We have already decided that it will be transacted. Security will be strict and strengthened. Every foreign genin team will receive at least one special jounin guard and the village representatives in A and BU. Naruto frowned. Danzo, the same Danzo who almost became the Rokudame? Minato eyed the man for a second before he continued. As for who I have chosen as supervisor, that matter is not of your concern. I would like to remind you that you are my advisor. I can accept your advice, or I can disregard it. If you think this is a major problem, you could have introduced it to the General Council when you had the opportunity. But Konoha won't back out from it now. Naruto would find this small confrontation amusing if he weren't straining his mind to dig in his memories until he finally found what he was looking for. Shitsai the root. It was so obvious now. The attack, the one who debilitated Minato from inside the walls. It was Danzo. Naruto buried himself into his own thoughts, cursing his own idiotic and dense brain for forgetting about that man. The dispute ended as fast as it started with a satisfied Minato, who kept an unreadable expression on his face while secretly moaning inside his mind at the sight of the twitching eye of the old warhawk. Then back to the business. The first and second round will last a total of 5 days. Those who fail either exam will leave the village immediately afterwards. The first part's supervisor will be our lead interrogator Kawamikoto. Minato gestured toward the named Shinobi, who nodded and stepped forward to speak. Thank you, Hokage-sama. We will follow previous examples before the war. The first will be a written test, with a stress decision-making situation, after information gathering and sharing. The Hokage nodded, not aware of his relative's riotous inner thoughts glued around Danzo. The second part's lead supervisor will be Orochimaru-san, who himself volunteered for this job. Minato gestured to his left, where the named Sannin emerged from the shadows like a ghost, and Naruto finally left his own troubled mind and clenched his hands in his rising anger. Anger toward the snake freak and anger toward himself, because he hadn't sensed his presence in advance. But now that the man stood almost in front of him, the disgusting smell of the reptile filled his whole nose. His troubled brain didn't process the meaning of his sentences when he started talking. Even his voice was disgusting. It was dead, cold, and slimy. He could feel as a small drop of sweat slowly ran down his spine when the slit amber eyes wandered toward him, shining with an odd sparkle which he absolutely did not like. He measured him like he was some kind of delicious food he was about to swallow whole after squeezing the life out of it. Naruto almost gagged when the tip of the long, pointed tongue sneakily trailed along his tooth behind the parted lips. His eyes locked, while the speech of the Hokage became only a distant noise. Supervisors will attend the second part, operate and interfere if necessary. I don't want any pointless deaths during the second portion of the exam. The nations already have enough war casualties and I don't want to increase these numbers. Several traps will be placed all around the forest by Toraku, who will also be the supervisor of the one-on-one fights. Minato gestured toward his brother, and frowned when he noted his trembling fists. He tracked his eyesight back to Orochimaru and concern rose inside his chest when he also realized the odd light in the amber eyes. However, he couldn't identify it, unlike the blonde Chunin. Naruto had already seen it with those creepy eyes. It was excitement and hunger for power. Toraku. Naruto flinched from the sudden raised voice and glanced toward his father with a confused face. Naruto. Pay attention. We will discuss everything later. Why yes? Prepare for a preliminary before the third round if necessary. We will have more participants than we first planned for. Naruto nodded. If there aren't any questions, then we are finished. The Hokage glanced around the room, and when nobody raised his voice, he nodded. Then the briefing is over. Toraku, I want to have a word with you. The attendees left the room after a bow or a short nod, or in Danzo's case without any motion or word. Minato turned toward the snake summoner one more time with an unreadable expression, observing the emotionless face and the odd glint in the eyes of the man. Countless questions rose inside his chest from that look. Sannin's behavior of late was odd since Sarutobi nominated him as his successor and not his student. He became paranoid and more addicted to his research. Sometimes he would barricade himself for days in the closed section of the library, and sometimes simply disappear from the village for days or even weeks. The finally averted his gaze from Minato's brother, and left the room along with everyone else after a small nod toward the Hokage. Only Toraku had stayed, his narrowed blue eyes following the back of the snake until he disappeared behind the entrance. Toraku. The blonde turned around to meet his father's eyes. Yes? Did you have a confrontation with Orochimaru? Naruto raised a questioning eyebrow. No. I didn't even talk to him. Why? Naruto felt as if a droplet of sweat ran down his spine because of the obvious lie. Well, actually it was just a half-lie. He really hadn't even talked with the snake bastard in this timeline. Minato just nodded, closing the conversation by grabbing a paper from one of the trays in front of him. I hate when you do this. Minato raised an eyebrow, but didn't look up from his paperwork. Do what? Just once would you give me a straight answer? Only once in a lifetime will I be satisfied. Minato let out a sigh and shook his head. Sorry, I can't talk about it. Naruto slowly shook his own head and folded his arms across his chest. His eyes wandered toward the hands of his father, his fingers around the fine brush, to distract himself. The tactic was successful. A frown appeared on his face in the next second. Did you propose to Kushina like you said you would? A satisfied smile replaced the frown when the Hokage winced at the question. I see. So the fearsome Yondaime Hokage, the yellow flash of Konoha, the one with the flea on sight command under his name in the bingo books, chickens out because of a girl. Minato winced over the paper one more time and let out a sigh. No, I am just waiting for a perfect opportunity. Naruto observed the man in front of him for a long silent second. I think you are just scared. Minato finally raised his head to look into the eyes of his brother, who almost made a step backward when he noted the odd sparkle in those eyes. Yes, I'm scared, but not because of the reasons you're thinking of. If I link her to me, I will be endangering her life. My enemies would target her, as they have already targeted you. Minato dug his face into his palms. I want to. I really want to. But just by wearing my name, Kushina will be in danger. What if I die and I leave her with my surname? What if we have a child? What if my enemies go after my infant's life to have revenge against me? These questions just don't let me rest. They come up again and again. Naruto could almost see the worry radiating from his pores. So that is it. That is why I got my mother's surname. To protect me. Long after his death, he still looked after my life, he still gave me protection. He stepped next to his father, and his hand moved toward his shoulder almost unconsciously to give his reassurance. That won't happen. I won't let you die, nor will I let anyone harm Kushina, or your future children. We are family. We are here to protect each other. Under the name of Namikaze or not. But Kushina will wear the name with pride, and not with fear, so will your children in the future. She is a kunoichi and a damn good one. Don't act like an overprotective father. Minato stayed silent for a long second, and then finally glanced up to his brother when his soft voice echoed one more time inside the office. Don't be afraid, I will protect her. I promise. Todoroki Toriku never goes back on his word. Guilt rose inside his chest once again, together with yearning, forcing him to avert his gaze from his father. He missed his old name, so damn much he couldn't even describe it. He wanted to hear his name slip from his father's lips, he wanted to end all of this, to erase the enormous walls of lies which were slowly shrouding his existence. But for the sake of everything he considered dear to him, he couldn't be selfish. This time, he had to act from the shadows as a real shinobi, even if that meant he had to erase his old self. Even if Uzumaki Naruto had to perish, together with his previous achievements, from the history books. But all of it would be worth it. If it meant that his loved ones would be safe, it was worth it. He could do it for a little longer. Only until he found that damn Uchiha. No more. Just until then. No. You are wrong. He snapped his head back to his father, confused, only to face his soft smile. It's Namikaze Toriku who never goes back on his word. Naruto stared back for a long silent second, his mind suddenly numb after it processed the words and his previous determination cracked. His lips parted to answer, but he instead nodded, unsure of his own voice. Namikaze, the name tickled inside his head for a long minute, talking down and overwhelming Kurama's voice at the back of his mind until his shocked face moved into a wide and proud smile. That was all he wanted in his childhood. That was what he craved for all those long, long years, to be a member of a real family. And now, in this surreal world where he finally received it from his own father, his joy and pride suddenly disappeared and was replaced with new emotions. He felt awkward, alien, and guilty. The temptation rose again with unbearable force, together with his guilt, to confess everything. He locked away the voice of Kurama, echoing inside his consciousness. He locked out everything else from his surroundings. Only two things were crystal clear. The picture of his father with the soft smile on his face, and the unbearable guilt inside his own chest, squeezing his heart painfully, his soul struggling continuously from the agony. His azure blue eyes had locked with identical ones, looking into his very soul for a long moment, increasing his struggle. He wanted to tell him everything. He wanted to tell him that he had already learned the Rasengan, that he had developed it further, that he had become strong like he wanted him to be. He wanted to see his father's eyes shining back at him proudly as he spoke his own name, and not a false one. Kurama's angry voice was surpassed by the loud echo of his pounding heart. To hell with the consequences. His lips slowly parted, but his throat felt drier than the desserts around Suna. When his voice finally left his mouth, it was weak and sore, almost unnoticeably faint, but it stabbed the silence around them unmercifully. His father eyed him curiously, waiting patiently for him to continue. I want to tell, Naruto swallowed, to ease away the dryness of his throat, never letting go of his father's gaze, not even for a moment. I want to tell you something, he choked out finally. Minato sent him a small encouraging smile. What? Naruto swallowed again, a soft warm breath leaving his lips as his sweat-soaked hands clenched into fists from the tension gathering in his very soul. His lips parted one more time, to finally confess and to get rid of the unbearable pain inside his chest and the enormous burden he was carrying. But the moment was disturbed by a harsh knock on the door, and the secretary stormed into the office before he could say anything. When she left the office only a minute later, the moment was already gone, as was the temptation. Sorry. What did you want to tell me? Naruto watched his father for a long silent minute, then in the end slowly shook his head and a soft smile appeared on his face. I just wanted to thank you. You can't imagine how much this means to me. His only answer was another soft and warm smile, while he desperately tried to block out Kurama's angry voice inside his head. Chapter 18. Namikaze Toriku. Remember your name. Do not lose hope, what you seek will be found. Neil Gaiman. Naruto let out a long and weary sigh. His eyes were locked onto the ink-black sky, spotted with an uncountable amount of stars, from behind the window of his room. His thoughts wandered around the events of the day. So many things had happened, and they had only increased the weight of the burden on his shoulders. The Kage would soon meet. Orochimaru Danzo, I forgot about Danzo. Kurama didn't answer, but he still felt the fox's silent nod in agreement. Root sigh, we must stop him somehow. He is an unknown factor. Aside from his responsibility for the Uchiha massacre and the existence of Root, we know nothing about his activity. We don't know how his actions were influencing the future. The old Warhawk always stayed in and acted from the shadows without real confrontation. If we interfere with him now, we won't know the consequences. Naruto narrowed his eyes. What Minato had told us before, about someone trying to debilitate him from the inside, that someone is Danzo. And I've got a feeling that he was behind that mess back at the Kusa borders with Kitsuchi. Oh, it seems you have finally started to use your brain. It's clear now that he was behind that ambush. Naruto only rolled his eyes, and parted his imaginary lips to retort, but the opportunity slipped from his fingers. He sees you as a possible treat. You can hate him for what he has done, but he has always acted for the sake of Konoha. If it wasn't for him, the Sandaime wouldn't have made that step with the Uchiha, and the coup would have been successful. But I doubt he will confront you in public after the failure in Kusa. Maybe he will send an assassin for your head. A snort bubbled up from the back of Naruto's throat. He is still doing things that are unforgivable. And how can you be so casual about Mai and your possible death? Just watch your back extra cautiously. Great. So now I should walk around with an eye on my back even in Konoha. We are safe until the end of the exams. The old Warhawk isn't a fool. Assassinating you now would only raise suspicion on the other nations and show that the leaf is weak. Konoha is not ready for another war. Danzo knows this. He will wait until the exams are over. He won't risk a war over your head. We should worry more about the snake. I don't like how he was eyeing us back then. A cold shiver ran through Naruto's spine, despite the warm cover wrapped around him. Yet he waited for more from the fox, but he got no answer. He had already received Kurama's lecture about his sudden urge to confess, and he had listened to it silently, like a guilty child during a scolding from his father. Kurama was right. It was too risky. The less people knew, the safer the future and his plans to change it would be. If anyone leaked out information that he knew such things, half of the elemental countries would be on his heels. But who would believe him anyway? Nobody would believe that he was from the future. How could he even prove it? Tell them things he shouldn't know. Their first thought would be that he was really a spy. Gathering information someone shouldn't have known, that was the purpose of a spy. Show them techniques? Minato had already shown him the Rasengan, so that was out of the box now. And even if he didn't, techniques could be learned and copied. Every technique could be remodeled with time and skill. His sage mode? To be able to use nature's energy is one of the rarest things, but not real evidence. Or show them Kurama's chakra and his seal? Kinkaku and Ginkaku were the finest examples showing that there were ways to obtain a Bija's power other than becoming the of its original form. What could he show to them to make them believe, instead of just locking him up in an asylum, or in a dark cell immediately? But he didn't want to lie to them. He didn't want to deceive them. Maybe it would be better just tell them everything and let everything go its way and see what happens. He turned around in the bed to face the empty wall in front of him, waiting for his troubled thoughts to settle down deep inside his mind and finally drift into sleep. 7 figures sat in a clearing, their loud laughs echoing back and forth amongst the trees of the forest surrounding the ancient walls of Konoha. A group of ANBU were lurking behind the shadows of the forest line, guarding their peace invisibly. His parents sat side by side, their hands linked together in their laps. Jiraiya's loud and enthusiastic voice filled the clearing, while the others listened to his tales about the heroes of the Second Great Shinobi War. Everybody was there. His parents, Sarutobi, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Rin, all of them were smiling and laughing. He was happy. I'm really happy. Minato cleared his throat and straightened himself, grabbing everyone's attention. I have an announcement. Actually, two. He gave a helping hand to Kushina, who also straightened herself, their hands locked one more time in the sweet embrace of pure love. We are getting married. Furthermore, I'm going to be a father. Can you believe it? I'm going to be a father. The cheerfulness expanded into overwhelming joy, while Naruto's heart almost exploded from his chest. Congratulations flew from every side, while he only stared at his parents, still sitting on the ground with a soft smile on his face. Tears of pure happiness stinged the corners of his eyes, and a lump filled the back of his throat. His parents crouched down in front of him, bringing themselves to eye level. Toriku, I want you to be the best big brother to our baby. I want you to guard him, as you promised. I trust you. I trust you with my life, and with the lives of my family. The tears of joy became the tears of guilt, tearing him apart from the inside once again. Kushina embraced him into a hug, her warm voice filled with love as she whispered softly into his ears, and his guilt exploded. His lips parted unconsciously, and the words slipped from his sour and dry lips without a second of consideration. I'm sorry to all of you. I'm so sorry. I lied to you. I remember everything. I'm not Toriku. The cheerful voices suddenly stopped. Everything froze and even the nature around them became soundless. Naruto glanced up at his father, whose expression first mirrored confusion, then a second later morphed into the perfect mask of betrayal, anger, and sheer fury. Kushina quickly backed away from him, her eyes flamed with hurt, stabbing into his very soul. Killing intent flashed across the clearing, and in the next moment, he found himself on the ground, pinned down painfully by the ANBU guards. His father's stern voice reached his ears in the next second. Then who are you? My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I don't know how, but I traveled back in time. I'm from the future. I'm the child who will be born to you soon. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Everybody looked back at him with eyes colder than the glaciers of the Arctic. The love and care had long disappeared, and were replaced by the same look he had received during his childhood. The same pointed and cold stares. The same hatred, disgust, and loathing shined in their eyes. His heart cracked, together with his soul. You are insane, take him to prison. I don't want to see him again. Naruto started to struggle, trying to get rid of the ANBU on his back, but his muscles became numb when he felt 2 fingers on the side of his neck, immediately closing his natural chakra flow. Wait. You have to believe me. You are in danger. All of you. Madara is going to kill you. Wait, damn it. His only answer was narrowed eyes from his father, while Jiraiya's voice echoed in the clearing. You are just insane. Who would believe you? You have to believe me. I'm not insane. At least listen to me, damn it. Golden flames encompassed his body as he reached for Kurama's power in his desperate struggle, making the ANBU on his back leap away as soon as the golden chakra touched their skin. He moved to get to his father, but Minato had already turned his back and started to walk away with Kushina. The world around them suddenly slipped to the side. A figure in an orange mask appeared between his parents, their figures disappearing inside a whirling vortex. His heart pumped rapidly, and his head desperately snapped toward the remaining figures, only to see them disappear one by one, each of them to their destined death. He saw the Shinigami behind Sarutobi, he saw as Rin dropped to the ground with an enormous stab wound in her chest, he saw as Jiraiya slowly slumped over, his body pinned by black rods. Only Kakashi remained untouched in the middle of the clearing, slowly walking toward him, his right arm already shrouded by electric blue lightning chakra. Naruto held up his hands in the universal sign of surrender. Sensei! Wait! We have to save them! We can save them! The small Kakashi didn't listen to him. He just shot forward, and in the next moment lightning chakra cracked Naruto's ribs, tearing into his chest. He didn't feel pain, only betrayal and overwhelming panic, but it flared only for a second before his nerves calmed down. It's just a dream. It's just a stupid dream. Naruto let his head fall onto his torso as soon as a relieved sigh left his lips. You are still weak. His head snapped up when he heard Madara's voice. Where a moment ago Kakashi had stood, now there were two crimson-red orbs. He saw nothing else, only the sinister eyes, but he knew who they belonged to perfectly. He stared squarely at the eyes, which were shining with a sinister crimson red. The three Tomo were slowly spinning and transforming into the form of the Manjiki Sharingan, only to change a second later into its final stage, the purple Rinnegan. With the last bit of his power, he grabbed the hand still buried into his chest, the odd mixture of fury and determination rising inside him to an unbearable level. I'm going to stop you. I don't care about your Manjiki Sharingan, or the Rinnegan or the Jubi, I'm going to stop you, Uchiha. This time I won't let them die. Madara only laughed unstoppingly, filling everything with his insanity as it echoed back and forth around him, while Naruto's body started to shake uncontrollably. I promise I'm going to stop you. The shaking increased, the world tilted again, and the ground slipped away from under his feet. Naruto jerked up from his bed, still on the verge of dream and reality, gasping for air. The next thing he noted was that he was staring into identical blue eyes, shining with concern. Dad. Minato's eyes widened for a second. It took Naruto a long moment to puzzle out what had happened, while his heavy breathing filled the air around them. His foggy brain slowly cleared, and his experienced eyes surveyed his environment. Orange walls, soft bed. He was in his room. The blonde distantly realized that he was gripping Minato's arms, his nails digging deep into his father's flesh, drawing blood and coloring Minato's light blue shirt. The adrenaline suddenly rushed out from his system, and he slowly released his painful grip on his father's arm, careful to not make any more damage. Without the boost, his head swayed and otherworldly fatigue rushed through his body, despite the fact that he had just woken up from his disturbing sleep. Naruto slumped forward with a groan, his shirt, soaked by his salty sweat, stuck to his body, his blanket completely crumpled and twisted at his feet. He wasn't just exhausted. He felt dead. When he finally managed to catch his breath and his rapidly beating heart slowed down, he shook his head to ease away the last bits of his nightmare and clear his thoughts. But it had the opposite effect. Instead of disappearing, the image of his loved ones' bloody bodies popped up ceaselessly in his mind once again, supplemented with depictions of the death of his comrades, his friends, along with pictures of countless motionless, nameless bodies on the blood-soaked battlefields. The almost unbearable weight of his responsibility settled down on his shoulders, pushing and slumping his body further into his ruined bed. As soon as he felt the sudden lump in his throat and the sting in the back of his eyes, he instantly burrowed his face deep into his palms, shrouding his swaying emotions on his face from his father's concerned eyes. He didn't want him to see him like this. A muffled, almost silent sob escaped from behind his hands, and he immediately felt gentle arms wrapping around his frame. His muscles tensed for a second from the unfamiliar contact, before he relaxed in the hug, his father's gentle whisper stroking his soul. It's all right. Let it out. Naruto violently shook his head in denial, his face still hidden in his hands. He tried to brace himself with the last strings of his pride, but it was a lost cause from the moment he felt Minato's arms around him. Another painful and muffled sob escaped from behind his lips, when a new pair of arms joined his father's. Smaller and gentler hands stroked his back, and Naruto unconsciously leaned into the warm touch of his mother. His walls cracked, and the dam that had been restraining his emotions ever since the Fourth Shinobi War started to break into tiny pieces. Unstoppable and shameless tears started to flow freely from his eyes, gathering in the lines of his skin to flow down onto his lap. He cried soundlessly like a 10-year-old child for long minutes, aside from one or two muffled sobs which managed to escape behind his palms, until he felt a gentle touch on two special points at the back of his neck. He didn't struggle, only nodded softly, accepting the offered help from his father to flee from his misery. A small spike of warm chakra ran through his system from the two pressure points, and his body relaxed and almost immediately drifted into a dreamless sleep. Minato gently placed him down on the bed, while Kushina grabbed a clean blanket. When they were finished, they stood in the door without a word, watching the now peacefully breathing teenager. His eyelids were still shining wet, but his relaxed expression calmed their aching hearts. A cheeky smile appeared on Kushina's face, followed by a small giggle, smoothing the heavy mood instantly. "He called you Dad?" Minato responded with a small, soft smile, while his eyes wandered back once more to his brother's peaceful form. He studied his face for a long, silent minute, his eyes lingering on the small traces of childhood still hovering on his features, but he already could see the sharper jawline and hints of a soon-to-be fine man. "Sometimes I forget that although he is a fine shinobi, he has also just left his childhood behind. We don't even know how old he is, Kushina. He looks around 18, but he could be much younger. I don't really know. Sometimes he acts like a 10-year-old child, and then in the next minute he spreads wisdom like an ancient old sage. But it was strange. I've never heard or seen him like this before." "Let him sleep. You can discuss it tomorrow. It's damn late and I'm sleepy." They settled down inside their warm bed, but for the rest of the night, the Yondaime Hokage couldn't find any more rest. His brother's pained and desperate yells echoed inside his head, as did his mumbling from before Kushina stepped into the room. He mumbles about the Manjikyu Sharingan. A memory floated inside his mind from their previous talk in the office. Torika had wanted to talk to him. He had desperately wanted to tell him something. Confess something. Damn all his luck and all his secretaries for their bad timing. He could start to feel suspicious again. He could run to Inoichi demanding an immediate checkup. But he dismissed the idea. Even if he remembered something, the happiness and love in Torika's eyes when he looked at them were still genuine. And the faint shadows of sorrow and guilt behind those azure pools were also genuine. They didn't appear long enough to be recognizable to anyone, but if Minato was really looking for it, he could see it. They were real. Those kinds of emotions could not be manipulated. The yellow flash let out a long sigh and folded his arms tighter around Kushina. First he would try to solve this jigsaw by himself, before he shook the fragile base of their trust again. It had been a week since Naruto had woken up in the middle of the night from his nightmare. For that long week Minato tried to speak with him, even corner him, but he refused to talk about it. He had been desperately trying to avoid the subject for as long as possible. Naruto was frustrated, and it only became worse and worse as the days passed. Nothing went as he planned, despite his determination growing after that dream, and him finally resigning to the fact that he was never going to reveal his identity. Everything had gone wrong. A clone had been searching continuously for Obito and Madara, hidden deep in the woods behind barriers, far from the walls of Konoha. But success eluded him. He found every damn shinobi of the elemental countries except for the two he was desperately looking for. And he also had to accept that a certain damn snake had also managed to sneak out of his reach. If he could at least find Orochimaru and one of his labs, but no. That serpent was not a fool. His presence disappeared at random times from random places. There was no pattern, not a sign, not anything that could lead Naruto to one of his hidden labs. But then again, it wasn't all that surprising, seeing as the snake had probably been acting in secret for a long period of time even back then. Might even have been for decades without anyone noticing his hidden activities. But to hide from his senjutsu like this, he had to admit the snake bastard was good. He wasn't one of the Sannin for nothing. He let out an angry snort and shook his head in frustration. His legs moved automatically toward his destination on the thin path, to the Hokage mansion at the border of the village. He nodded in greeting toward the ANBU guard who was lurking behind the shadows of a bush, silently watching over their peace and safety. After a short chain of hand signs, he channeled some chakra into the small seal and the big mahogany door opened with an almost silent click. Muffled voices could be heard from the living room. After a second of consideration, he decided to grab something to eat from the kitchen before heading up to his room. Minato most likely had a visitor, and based on the chakra signature, it was Uchiha Fugaku. Naruto didn't want to meet with that man. He always looked at him like he was some kind of criminal. He grimaced at the thought. He never liked the man, and after Toby told them the truth behind the massacre, the dislike only increased. Naruto opened the fridge, but he froze when the muffled voices became louder and more vehement. They were arguing, and the privacy seal he sensed was becoming weaker and weaker, based on the louder and louder argument until it finally completely disappeared when it ran out of chakra. Their voices echoed back and forth inside the house crystal clear. Toriku is the living example that it is already out of your hands. The clan head simply folded his arms in front of his chest and raised his head higher in denial. This proves nothing. That is just your theory about his appearance, and you have got no real evidence. You still don't have any proof that he is here because of an Uchiha. You can't be that impassive about this. You know just as well as I do that it is the most relevant theory. There is someone else out there with a Sharingan. An Uchiha or someone else with the who is powerful enough to disarm him. And I think his outburst last week is proof enough. Tell me. You claim that no one of your clan attacked him, and no one possesses the Manjikyu Sharingan. Then how did he know about it? Hell, even I didn't know the Manjikyu stage existed, and neither did you before you dug up the clan's archives for me. So don't try telling me that his appearance isn't connected with it. Naruto froze. What the hell? How the hell did they know about that? Was he talking in his sleep? Don't be too concerned. They are just grasping around in the dark. At least they will be more on alert when the time comes. Naruto only nodded as a silent response. His senses were still glued on the conversation in the next room, afraid of missing even a word. I'm not here because of that. We've already discussed that topic 100 times since he appeared, and no one from my clan attacked that damn kid, and no one is out there with a Sharingan besides Kakashi. Don't change the topic. I came here to talk about your student. The elders have made a last request for you. The Uchiha isn't something that can simply be offered. The elders are still adamant about their previous stand. A furious snort echoed in the large living room, and it was soon followed by the killer intent of Minato. I still don't care what your elders are demanding. I am Hokage, and I said no once, and I will say no this time too. Tell the old geezers again that Kakashi's Sharingan will stay where it is. It was Obito's last wish, and not even the clan can go against his last will. Naruto froze again, his jaw almost to the ground. He had also seen the glares Kakashi sometimes received from the members of the Uchiha clan, but he never thought the situation was this stressed. That they wanted to get Obito's eye back. Minato. If you go against them, you will lose the elders' support with time. The Yondaime snorted one more time and turned his back to the clan leader. And what about your support? Fugaku let out a weary sigh. I thought you knew that during your short time as the Hokage, you have managed to earn my support, but as a clan head, I also have to take into consideration the decisions of the elders. As a clan head, I have to be focused on the clan's interest and welfare beyond my personal opinions. But I must warn you. The clan is becoming more and more distant from Konoha. The new information stunned Naruto. It had already begun. The clan was already starting to loosen its bonds with the village. But more importantly, Fugaku had apparently been originally opposed to the coup, because of Minato. Then why? Why was it that in the end, he stepped up with the elders? It was my attack and his death. After your birth, the village did not trust in the Uchiha anymore. That was the last nail in their coffin. It seems your father's death links more events than we first thought. Naruto only nodded in agreement. That means if he could prevent that, maybe he could also interfere with the massacre directly. I respect you more than the third. He was a good leader, but he started to become too old, too kind-hearted and blind to some serious problems. During this short period of time, you have already proved to me that I was wrong to think that you would follow his footsteps. Without your silent support of the clan, the elders' grudge would have only grown larger and larger. The loyalty of the clan hangs by a hair, and only your silent acts are restraining them from doing something. I can see what you are doing. What are you trying to do? But it's not enough. The clan leader shook his head and continued. Currently I am the only one who stands against them, and I have to admit my tolerance will also reach its end if things continue as they are. We are one of the founding clans, but it seems like the village sometimes forgets this. The Uchiha clan is becoming alienated, and not just by the village's shinobi, but also by the other citizens. They fear us like we are some kind of criminals and not the ones who are guarding their peace. Do you think that I like this situation? Where there is a village inside the village? Do you think I'm so blind that I can't see the problems between your clan and the others? That I don't realize the people are starting to fear you instead of honoring your name? That I haven't noticed some of you growing more and more arrogant because of it? Minato the named man closed his mouth immediately when their eyes met for a second. And what he found in the dark eyes made the hair on the back of his neck stand up instantly. It was fear. Some of the elders are even whispering about a coup. They'll soon take the reins if nothing happens. Minato didn't respond for a long minute, allowing his thoughts to settle down. And when they finally did so, he let out a long sigh. How much time do you think we have before that happens? Fugaku didn't answer for another long moment, gathering and more likely waiting his own words before they finally echoed inside the small room. Years. A decade at most if nothing changes. Most of the clan aren't supporting the act. Yet. But with time. Who else knows about it? Nobody else. Just you. Not even the Sandaime. Good. It must stay like that. Naruto finally decided it was enough. He heard plenty, and if they found out he was eavesdropping, he would get into big trouble. Not to mention, if someone else overheard this conversation, the clan would be in bigger trouble. He slowly moved to the entrance of the room and hesitantly cleared his throat to gain the other two men's attention. It was successful. They immediately flung their heads toward him. Minato blinked, and the stern face of the clan leader immediately melted away, first to surprise, then to shock. The Hokage glanced down to the privacy seal on the coffee table and grimaced, immediately replacing the worn-out seal, before turning toward his relative with the full authority of the Yondaime Hokage. What you heard here cannot slip from your mouth. Ever. You understand? Naruto nodded and turned toward the clan leader. My apologies, Uchiha-sama, but if you don't agree with the elders, why don't you just go against them? Fugaku raised an eyebrow, observing him with a carefully emotionless face. However, Naruto saw that he was restraining himself from snapping at him immediately or casting him out of the room. You know nothing about the situation. Naruto shrugged. Maybe I don't know every aspect, but even I can see that it's not too difficult a situation. You have to dismiss segregation and stand your ground against your elders. Fugaku's eyebrow rose more, if that was even possible. His muscles visibly tensed, but Minato only shook his head. It isn't that easy. If Fugaku openly goes against the elders, they could strip him of his position as clan head, and they would place someone else whom they could move as a puppet. Naruto narrowed his eyes and grimaced. Then you just have to flip the situation upside down. He has to obtain the elders' full respect to influence them. That would give you time to change the situation. The biggest problem is the separation, I guess. Minato curled an eyebrow. What's on your mind, Torika? What could he know about politics? He is just a teenager. The clan leader snorted, but the Hokage slowly shook his head. I would disagree with that. He is good at affecting people to go into a better direction. And he is often able to see aspects that have been overlooked. Naruto unconsciously straightened himself after his father's praise. Well, you know, if maybe Naruto trailed off, people respect power, and this is definitely more true for the most powerful clan in Konoha. His thoughts drifted back to stuck-up and almighty Uchiha Sasuke. He never showed any respect to him, at least not until he proved that he was at least equal to him. I mean, you two trust each other. Well, if I'm judging correctly. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't share this kind of information. The named men shared a quick glance and nodded. Well then, Minato, why don't you give him a position of authority and power? It would please the elders and he could act freely as a clan head. If he shows that he has your respect, they will settle down, and you can work more calmly on the root of the problem. I know that walls can't just be bulldozed down, but if you let the people know more about the clan, it could be a good start. For example, becoming a police officer is a cool thing. Minato frowned and turned around, lost in his thoughts for a long silent minute, unaware of the other two men in the room eyeing him warily. They could also become greedy by this. There is a chance that they will ask for more power, and still try to go against Fugaku's will. This time, it was Fugaku who shook his head. The decoy could actually work. The boy is right. The elders respect power above everything else. This could settle their frustration and give us more time to work on segregation. We as a clan should become more open to the village. He glanced at Naruto with narrowed eyes. The question is how you know my clan so well. Naruto only casually shrugged and poked his temple. This was the first time he actually felt grateful for Kurama's small interference back then. He could cover up a lot of things with his amnesia as an excuse. Minato let out a small chuckle and finally turned around to face the others, his face serious once more. I was already arranging a big change with the body of personal advisors, but I wanted to wait until the council became more familiar with me before pushing them over the edge. I plan to make this step next year, but I think now is as good a time as any, if not better. Minato folded his arms across his chest, a frown appearing on his face as he became lost in his thoughts. You haven't mentioned anything like that. No, because it wasn't relevant, Fugaku. They are at ease currently, but it would give us a perfect opportunity. Minato shrugged casually. What's your plan? The Hokage's personal advisors aren't satisfying my needs, Minato explained. I don't trust them. They were chosen by the Sandaime decades ago, and since then they've gathered too much power and have become too arrogant. I'm sure they won't stay silent for long. I can't let them gather so much power as to allow them to act freely behind the Hokage's back. Behind my back. I'm aware that one advisor especially is trying to influence the other two to his advantage in smaller issues, but I can't just simply cancel the whole body. The body of personal advisors is essential in case a fast decision is necessary. I also need the help and advice. That one individual is especially problematic. But first I need to steady the other sections of the personal advisors. Only after that is done can I try to get rid of him. And slowly. I'm afraid that if I just cut him out of the system he will do something drastic. A deep frown appeared on Minato's face, his eyes darkening into royal blue. Danzo, he could be a big problem in the future. Minato started to pace back and forth in the room, lost in his own world for long silent minutes, his movements followed by the curious eyes of his two companions. I believe that he acts on behalf of the village. I truly believe that his intentions are not against the village's welfare, but I do believe that he is walking in the wrong direction. He is heading into the very darkness Sarutobi left him to handle. I'm afraid that with time he will act more drastically, forsaking morals, if he hasn't already taken that step. While I do believe he loves Konoha as much as I do, there is a line over which I would never cross. But he doesn't have such limits. He will do anything for Konoha. And that anything is something I'm afraid to even contemplate. He would kill and manipulate people if he thinks it necessary for Konoha's future. I have to interfere before something goes terribly wrong. I'm aware of him. He glanced toward his brother, plaything. Naruto frowned. So his father did know about Root. What do you want to do with the personal advisors? Minato stopped his pacing and looked up at Fugaku to answer his question. As I already told you, they have too much power and I don't trust them. I want trustworthy and strong people around me when there is no time to summon the whole council. Plus, currently they don't have the knowledge to fully support the Hokage. Instead, they are three old hags who aren't up to date with things. Okay, I have to admit Danzo is up to date, but the other two. Minato slowly shook his head again. I want to reselect the 3 personal council members as a first step. Who do you have in mind? Minato turned to face Fugaku. The Jounin commander, Nara Shikaku, as the brain and as the representative of the shinobi. He knows our shinobi up and down, and because of missions he also knows what's going on outside of the walls. Naruto suppressed an amused snort. During the war and after Shikaku's death, it was Shikamaru who had acted as the tactician and the brain, keeping Naruto from just rushing out thoughtlessly. If Naruto hadn't declined the position back then, as Hokage he'd have definitely wanted Shikaku's son beside him. One open position for someone who will be elected by the current General Council. I will give free rein to the council in that matter. And last but not least, the 3rd member, who will also be picked by me personally, will be someone who knows what's going on inside the village, among both civilians and shinobi, and also is up to date with the village's security. Someone who will interact with and already looks out for the civilians. Someone who will cooperate with them in some cases from now on. Maybe with that, his people could forge stronger bonds with them. A small smile appeared on Minato's face as he observed the clan leader with an amused glint in his eyes, watching as realization slowly appeared on Fugaku's face, forcing the calm mask he always wore to crack as his features moved into the perfect example of disbelief. I don't know what to say. Minato sent a wide grin to his hesitant companion. Just accept. You are more than suitable to be one of my personal advisors. I earned your respect with time. You didn't just give it to me instantly like the others. Furthermore, you are not afraid to tell me if I'm doing something idiotic. I'm going to speak with that lazy Nara and I will put the changes to vote at the next council meeting. Assuming they pass, we'd not only be helping the Uchiha segregation issue, but we'd also shake up Danzo quite a bit. Naruto frowned, confusion running across his face. This Danzo guy, he has the power to influence the council, right? If you want to remove him, you have to make sure that they won't elect him to the open position again and again. A cheeky smile appeared on Minato's face. There will be a new rule. Those who have already acted as personal advisors will be forbidden from that position for 10 years after the first election. With this rule, all of the council members will get a chance to become the Hokage's personal advisor. Plus, it would rule out the possibility of someone gaining too much power for a long period of time. I think the council will understand my point of view. Naruto only hummed in response and scratched his cheek. Still, it's very likely that Danzo will be the third member, Minato shrugged, but I won't be too bothered if Danzo gets his seat back now. His presence would be troublesome, but if the other two advisors are hard to influence, it won't be an issue. That is the current main problem. Hamura and Kohara are easy to influence, and the three of them together could easily outrule my decisions. I don't have any doubts that with Fugaku and Shikaku at my side he will lose a major part of his power. Maybe it is a temporary solution until the next round, but it will always depend on the other parties of the council. I'd bet that the next personal advisor body will have Hyuga Hayashi and the Inuzuka head in the line. They are both hard to influence and loyal to the Hokage and have the support of the other clans. If my intuition is correct, and most of the time it is, it won't matter who the third party is as long as the other two are loyal and trustworthy. With Danzo not in a position to drastically influence the decision-making process, I could sleep well at night for a long time. Our next step is to make the Konoha military police force open to any shinobi and not exclusive to Uchiha. We will let them join your side. Let them see and experience your daily life and intermingle with the clan members. It'll help. And with time, the walls that are now separating your clan from the rest of the village can fall. Fugaku made a wondering face, then in the end nodded, slightly lower with gratitude than was actually necessary. Minato sent a small smile toward the clan head before he turned to his brother, once again slipping into the authority of a Hokage. You already know, but I will repeat once more. Everything you heard now, or before, is a village secret. Under no condition are you to repeat any of this. If this information were to reach Danzo's ears, I don't even want to think about what he would do to prevent a future coup. I understand, Hokage-sama. I really appreciate your trust. Naruto made a small bow with his head, adding weight to his words. Minato watched his brother figure's every small movement, every twitch of his muscles, every change in his eyes, but when he found no lie there, he nodded. Good. Fugaku, we will talk tomorrow. The named man made a small bow and left the house, leaving the two blondes alone. Minato's cerulean eyes observe his relative with an unreadable expression, until his features settle into a small smile. You know, with a little polishing around the edges, you would become great Hokage material. Naruto's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened as he glanced up to his father. Seriously? Yeah. Seriously. Your diplomatic style may be a little rough, but that's something that can be learned with time. A little more manners and thoughtfulness and you'd be good to go. With your personality, you would be a good leader. Determined, sometimes easygoing or goofy, even silly, but with that you'll easily line everyone behind you with time. You've been here since when? 5 months? And you've already managed to wind a quarter of the village around your finger. Minato grinned and continued. Sometimes you act like an idiot, but you can also be deathly serious and as wise as a sage when you have to be. You are unpredictable, which is also good in politics, and you have a tendency to throw a stone into still water. Your hero complex is just a bonus to the package, even if it makes you reckless sometimes. You're not afraid to sacrifice your life for your loved ones, and this is something a real leader would do for the village. A beaming smile appeared on Minato's face, his hands still resting on Naruto's shoulders, who silently stared up at with disbelief, the edge of his ears flaming crimson red. If you become much stronger, I should really start to be afraid for my hat. Minato's face softened to a tender smile as he continued. I don't know where you come from, but the will of fire burns inside you, even brighter than it does in some of the native-born shinobi of Konoha. Naruto's whole body seemed to beam with pride. But he also felt a little bit of regret. He had declined the position to be the Rokudaime. Maybe it was the wrong decision after all. Minato tightened his grip a little on his shoulder to get his attention, and he immediately glanced up to his father's now concerned eyes. Look, I know you don't want to talk about what happened last week, but if you ever change your mind, I will be here. But I would really appreciate your trust. Naruto felt his body stiffen, and he almost immediately averted his gaze. He licked his lips to ease away the dryness, and sent a wide grin in response. Thanks, but it was just a silly dream about me falling from the sky. Minato frowned. Even when the grin looked honest, even when his voice was cheerful, he could see the lie in his eyes. He could see that even when he concentrated with every nerve to look happy, his eyes didn't sparkle with the same cheerfulness. They were darkened, they were foggy. Clouded by guilt once again. Then it was gone. Minato let out a weary sigh and shook his head. Please don't lie to me. Naruto flinched, and his orbs drifted to the side in shame, even though his father's voice was barely enough to call it a whisper. That was it. He really couldn't lie directly to his father's face. His voice was soft as he mumbled his sincere answer. You were dead, all of you were killed. Kushina, Jiraiya, everyone I care for. Minato frowned, watching his brother's eyes with every nerve. Now they seemed sincere. The fourth let out another sigh. Is it connected with a Mangekyo Sharingan? Naruto hesitantly nodded. He didn't dare to look back to his father, afraid to see suspicion in his eyes. I see. But don't be concerned. We are all more than capable of kicking an Uchiha's ass if necessary. A wide and confident smile appeared on Minato's face. Naruto finally gathered enough courage and glanced up to his smiling father, but he could force only a shadow of a real smile on his own face. Yeah. But not if he has Kurama as backup, he added silently. Are you really sure about this? Naruto made a determined nod in his mindscape. I'm sure. It could damage him. He is a damn genius. He can handle it. Hey, are you going to show me what you mumbled about before, or did you drag me here to watch you daydream? Naruto glanced up to meet his father's annoyed, but still curious blue eyes. Scrunching his nose with a grimace, he retorted, Geez, for being a you sure are impatient. The blonde time traveler shook his head disapprovingly, and gestured toward the edge of the training ground. The named impatient Hokage rolled his eyes, but obediently walked to the side and folded his arms in front his chest, even tapping the ground continuously with his foot like a small child, waiting for his brother to finally demonstrate why he had been dragged through the whole village without any explanation. Minato watched with impatient eyes as two clones popped into existence next to his brother figure. One of them started talking while they moved into position, forming a triangle. The trick is in teamwork. But as soon as it strikes, you have to run for your life, or you will also get caught in the effects. If that happens, it could be deadly for you. The real Naruto made a last glance toward his father and sent a wide smirk. Now just watch. The young Hokage snorted and opened his mouth to retort in annoyance. But his mouth was left hanging open, his eyes widened, and his arms slackened as powerful chakra started to swirl with insane speed between the palms of his relative and the clones, and he realized what was about to happen. A shining azure orb, made from pure energy, appeared between the hands, then it slowly shifted. The air filled with the squealing sound of razor-sharp wind chakra. 4 snow-white chakra blades appeared on the sides of the Rasengan, made of pure wind chakra. Minato's ears slowly became numb from the harsh sound as millions of invisible blades continuously cut into the empty air, and the blonde teen slowly raised the finished technique above his head. Futon Raisin Shuriken, Naruto said in a low tone, but his lips turned into the widest grin he could manage without tearing his face apart, seeing the expression on his father's features. He let the ball spin slower and slower until it faded into nothingness. Step by step, the squealing sound faded away, leaving behind an unnatural silence. The young Hokage's eyes were still frozen on the now empty place where not a second ago he could see the technique he'd been desperately trying to finish for years. And there stood his brother, maybe a decade younger than him, and he pulled it out like it was nothing. His ears were still ringing, his eyes were still wide, his sight still frozen to the place where the technique disappeared. Even his mind became numb by the sheer power of the technique. Naruto slowly stepped in front of him with a satisfied smile on his face. So you want to learn it? Azure eyes snapped back to reality as he blinked away his awe. Then in the next second Minato smirked. You can bet on it, Ototo. Excited, surprised, and even angry murmurs spread across the lines of the village council after Minato's announcement. The aforementioned man watched the members with a straight face, his chin resting on his folded fingers, But when the members didn't seem to calm down after 2 minutes of continuous argument, a vein started to throb on his temple, mimicking the rhythm of his heartbeat. Silence! He slammed his fist onto the hard surface of the wooden table, making the murmurs die down immediately. Don't act like immature children. You heard my proposal. Now I'm waiting for any intelligent questions concerning my decision. You can't do this. Danzo was the first one to hiss out through his gritted teeth in restrained anger, and sent a very out-of-character pointed glare toward Minato. I would like to correct you, Danzo-san. I can do it, if the General Council and the daimyo agree with my proposal. I already received the daimyo's approval months ago, and I don't think our members will oppose it after hearing the details. The current personal advisory body is not competent enough to support decision-making in a lot of aspects. How dare you! Hamura and Kohara stood up as one immediately, with the speed to give a lie to their age. Minato only raised a silencing hand, aware of the raised eyebrow of the third next to him. My apologies for my rudeness, but the Hokage's personal advisors must be up to date with everything that goes on inside and outside of the village. While I do not question your knowledge and experience in other aspects, you are definitely not competent in this very important part. Tell me, Kohara-san, what's the current situation between Kusa and Takigakure? We know nothing about their current relationship, and you know this very well. Shikaka-san, what's your opinion in this case? The Nara closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts before he opened them to answer. Minato used sly fox. That is true, that we haven't received any direct information, but during the assignments in that area, our troops spotted several patrolling groups from both of the villages. The activity had been increasing until 2 weeks ago, when we received an assassination request. The target was one of the Takigakure noblemen. The client was officially anonymous, but it is clear that it was Kusa. After the assassination, the patrolling died down and our troops spotted several small groups, with 1 or 2 envoys, going back and forth between the 2 small villages. After that nobleman's death, they've obviously started peace talks with each other. You could have received all of this information if you read the mission reports, Kohara-san. Minato nodded, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face when he saw the twitching eyes of the old woman. This proves nothing. Minato closed his eyes, then glanced toward Hamura. Hamura-san. Something happened 2 days ago in the 6th district of the village, at the market. Could you enlighten us about that case? The named man narrowed his eyes, and snorted dismissively. Minato had already won. Uchiha-san. If you would be so kind, Fugaka nodded. A new, small group of traveling merchants arrived in the village 3 days ago. They are working with unbelievably cheap prices. Our vendors didn't tolerate that too well. Thank you, Uchiha-san. Minato nodded. Are there any more questions considering the necessity of a new personal advisor body? His only answer was silence, and he nodded once more in acknowledgement. If there are no more questions, I will open the vote. Those who agree with my proposals regarding the personal advisory body, please raise your hands. Several hands rose almost immediately, and the supporters were obviously dominant. He didn't even have to count the raised hands. And lastly, there is another issue you have to be aware of. From next week, Konoha military police forces will accept recruits outside the Uchiha clan. Minato looked over the council members one by one, waiting for any reaction or resistance, but none came. A wide grin spread across his face. Perfect. For the next council meeting, discuss who you are going to nominate as the third advisor. You are dismissed. Minato watched as the members left the room one by one, most of them with an amused expression on their face. Only the third Hokage stayed, still sitting by his side, stoically puffing his never-missing pipe and filling the meeting room with the scent of the mixture of herbs and tobacco. When the last of the council left the room, Minato allowed himself to let out a relieved sigh and slumped down to the desk. He enjoyed the cold surface of the wood against his throbbing temple with closed eyes. Sandaime cleared his throat to gain his attention. Just let me enjoy my victory for a little longer in silence. Please. Minato grunted. You made a dangerous step, Minato. You didn't just poke, you kicked the sleeping tiger in the face. The named blonde let out a long and weary sigh and straightened himself to rub his eyes. A dangerous, but necessary step. And you know that. He's got too much influence over Hamura and Koharu. Maybe you could ignore that for years, but I can't allude to senility like you. Sarutobi let out an amused snort. I'm not that old. Yet you still turned a blind eye, just so you didn't have to see the problems. The third rubbed the bridge of his nose and let out a weary sigh. In the next second, the shadows around his wrinkles deepened, his back seemed to slump slightly under a sudden weight like he had suddenly become older by a decade during this 1 second. Maybe you think I let him act on his own and I turned my head, but letting him do so for this long was part of a long-term plan. While Danzo stays in the background, he won't do anything drastic. But now, I really don't know what his next move will be. Minato snorted and folded his arms across his chest. You were gambling like Tsunade. I know what Danzo is doing behind the scenes, and I know you let him deal with the darkest missions. I understand why you left him and Root ANBU alone. But we are different. Maybe you are right. Maybe I became too old to deal with hindrances, and maybe I believe that if I pretended a problem didn't exist it would simply disappear with time. The Shodaime and the Nidaime also warned me about this. Minato let out a small smile. Perhaps. But all of us have our weaknesses. I've got friends to turn to if I need help. So do you. You just sometimes forgot that and bore those burdens alone. Maybe. But I think I made at least one good decision, to give my hat to you, the third answered with a small smile on his face. They stayed in silence, enjoying each other's company in the empty meeting room. The third blew out some bluish smoke, watching as it danced through the air, swirling abstractly only to completely dissolve in the air a second later. Sarutobi eyed the young leader carefully, his old experienced eyes observing him with a little concern. Do you think it was a good idea to teach him the Rasengan? Not to mention dismiss the surveillance? Minato rolled his head side to ease away the stiffness of his muscles and also hide his annoyance. He didn't answer, only shrugged. Silence fell over them for another long minute until Yondaime opened his mouth to finally respond. Since he appeared, he's done nothing wrong. He is a good boy, Sarutobi. All of his actions have caused only benefit to this village and not harm. The Kazekage is grateful to us. He saved the life of his wife and the sanity of his son. The alliance between Konoha and Suna is stronger than it would have been without him. Every country agreed to participate in the Chunin exams for the first time since the Second Shinobi War. All the 5 Kage will meet for the first time in history. Maybe we can really make an alliance. Or at least make the first step toward it. And I also got the final push to make the necessary steps to change the council and help out the Uchiha. Kakashi slowly starts to get out of his shell thanks to Toriku. Hell, I heard him snicker last week. And he gave a powerful jutsu to me. Sarutobi didn't answer. His old eyes were still locked on his successor, who just continued without a pause. I'm not dense. I'm aware that he changed, but I truly believe that he means no harm to the village and my opinion won't change until he does something to contradict it. I know perfectly well when he is lying. A weary sigh left Minato's soft lips, then a caring smile spread across his face. He is a member of my family, and he truly cares for this village. In fact, he cares for the whole shinobi world. I also want peace between all of the nations, but compared to his determination and efforts, mine look like a child's plaything. A hand ran through his golden locks, easing away his increasing frustration. You can sleep well, Hiruzen. If we spot anything that points towards him being a threat, we will step in. But not before. I still know my responsibilities. You don't have to remind me about them. If I have to, I will kill my heart for this village. I would die for this village. But for now, I trust him. Hiruzen's eyes stabbed through Minato, looking into the very soul of the man in front of him. And when he found what he was looking for, the third nodded in his satisfaction. The distant sounds of dripping water filled the black passages, while the faint light of the lamps painted abstract forms with the shadows on the floor. Otherworldly shadow creatures danced on the empty walls, and the only thing that broke their struggle was a lonely figure in black robes who silently slipped toward a giant wooden door like a snake. The hinges didn't squeak, or make any sound in general, and the door opened as smoothly as the visitor's soundless and graceful movements in the passage. He stepped closer to the wooden desk in the middle of the room, and the lean figure glanced at a very ravaged Danzo seated behind it. The Warhawk took his time before he addressed the visitor with a tint of irritation in his voice. Do you have some new information to report about Orochimaru? No. Nothing new which is worth mentioning. I see. So he has no bloodline limit, no other special abilities that could give us a headache? A shadow of a sinister smile flashed across on the pale face, but not for a long enough time to be recognizable. He has strong and advanced understanding and enhanced sensing abilities, but those are already listed in the previous reports. Nothing new that a bigger group of elites can handle. Then why did you volunteer for this task? Any of my elite shinobi could do this reconnaissance. The didn't answer for a long silent minute, weighing his words carefully before he opened his mouth, revealing predatory sharp and pointed teeth behind his lips. Let's just say I got a small grudge against Minato-kun and some personal interests in Toriko-kun. Jiraiya watched from behind as his former sensei fixed his old and experienced eyes out through the window. The orbs darted across the people below his gaze, living their own, innocent lives, unaware of the hidden problems hovering above their heads continuously. The Sannin sipped from his tea, waiting for Sarutobi to finally face him and settle down in front of him. He didn't have to wait too long. I want you to be sincere. What's the situation with Toriko-kun? Did you find anything new that points toward him being a threat to this village? Although Sarutobi wasn't the leader of the village anymore, he still kept an eye on some cases. And Minato's newfound relative was one of those special cases. The Toad Sage took another sip, and then slowly put down his cup and leaned back, letting the question hang in the air for a long tense minute to Sarutobi's annoyance before he answered. Have you recently talked to him, old man? Sarutobi slowly shook his head. You should. If you do, look into his eyes. Look deep into his eyes and you will find your answer there. Because his eyes reflect his very soul. Always. Don't beat around the bush, Jiraiya. Sarutobi finally snapped, his patience gone. The named man let out a long sigh. Fine, he mumbled, I think he remembers. Probably not everything, but at least some parts of his past. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes, while Jiraiya continued. Is he hiding something? Definitely. Is he a threat to the village? Definitely not. He truly cares for this village, for Minato and Kushina. He cares for me and the two Gaki. He even cares for you. You should hear him, he talks about you with respect and love like you were some kind of grandfather or something. Sarutobi frowned at Jiraiya's finger, which was pointing straight at his chest. Do you think Minato also suspects it? Jiraiya closed his eyes and nodded. Of course. He is an observant little brat. He always was. Now, he is waiting just like me. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes. Then why don't you step in? Jiraiya snorted and shook his head. And then what? Lock him up? Torture him until he confesses or have Inoichi attack his mind until he becomes nuts? Jiraiya shook his head once more. It wouldn't do us any good. That brat is more stubborn than Minato and Kushina together. He won't confess under torture or a simple interrogation. With the old-fashioned way, we would know nothing about him. But if we let him act freely and supervise him from the background, soon he will either slip, or we will realize his true intentions if he even has anything like that. The sage sipped from his tea, then continued. But I don't think so. He is a terrible liar. He can act, and even put a real actor to shame, but as soon as a false word slips from his mouth you can see it in his eyes. You can almost feel his shame. He is too honest for a shinobi. So instead of lying completely, he tells half-truths or simply doesn't answer. He is definitely not a spy or a sleeping agent, he is not that type. You can be at ease. His sudden appearance isn't related to any ill intentions toward Konoha, and with time we can put together the pieces of his jigsaw. But what Minato and I both think from all of this is that he is trying to get rid of his past. He is trying hard to earn our acknowledgement, and be a valuable member of Konoha. Sarutobi puffed from his pipe and slowly let out the calming smoke into the empty air, a tint of irritation in his voice. Minato trusts that boy too much. A small smile spread on Jiraiya's face. The feeling is mutual. Toriku trusts Minato, and this is why he didn't tell us that he remembers. He didn't want those bonds to falter. Sarutobi closed his eyes and scowled. And you trust him also? Jiraiya didn't answer for a long, silent and also tense minute, weighing his own words before he answered. I do. The third let out a long and weary sigh and rubbed the bridge of his nose in the hope that it would ease away his doubts, but Jiraiya's faint voice kicked him out from his musing. The great Toad Sage summoned me 2 days before I came home and became the Jounin sensei of Minato's old team. The frown deepened on Sarutobi's face, waiting for his student to continue. He told me that he saw a new vision. I think it's about Toriku. The third's eyes widened as he leaned forward, eagerly waiting for Jiraiya to finish. He said that a boy trying to escape from the path of his past will appear in your life. He will bring a new chance and a new tomorrow. That's all he said. Cryptic as always. The frown appeared on the face of Sarutobi, and he closed his old eyes once more to weigh this new information. A new chance for what? Jiraiya shook his head. A new chance to fulfill the prophecy? I don't know. But I want to think it's about that. When Toriko talks about peace, I believe in him, old man. I truly believe that he is able to find that peace. That he can end the circle of hatred, the Toad Sage said slowly, before his seriousness became nowhere to be seen as he sent a wide grin toward his once leader. Do you want to confront him in the future? The Sannin thought about it for a second before he shook his head. Not in the near future. He trusts me. I think he will confess with time. Once, he almost confessed to Minato. I really hope both of you are right. For the sake of my sanity and for the sake of the village. Hey old man, you retired? Let Minato lead this village. He knows what he's doing. So do I. I'm not a stupid immature genin anymore. Jiraiya sent back a cheeky grin, and emptied his cup with one swig. The Sannin grimaced like a child when the hot liquid burned down his throat, making the old leader let out another long sigh and shake his head in a fatherly way, while his matured student tried to look as grown-up as he could as he choked and coughed. A loud scream echoed inside the Hokage mansion, and Naruto was on his feet in the next moment, rushing toward its source with insane speed. Only his last bit of his logical mind restrained him from snatching up some of Kurama's chakra to boost up his speed. In the next second he kicked the door open to jump onto the attacker, only to find none, though his mind became frozen by the sight in front of him. He stared at his mother's lap, where her clothes were soaked with crimson liquid. Her eyes were wide as she just stared down at Minato, who was kneeling on the floor next to their bed, his face as red as Kushina's stained lap. He glared at his brother in obvious annoyance. Naruto's mind raced through several horrifying scenarios while he jumped next to his mother, shoving his father to the side and shaking her shoulder. Who hurt you? Where is the bastard? Kushina blinked herself out from her temporary daze and finally shook Naruto's hands off of her, but she didn't avert her gaze from his father on the ground. However, instead of just staring, she burst out into a hysterical laugh. The smell of alcohol hit Naruto's nose, and that was the moment when he decided to finally glance around for real to survey the situation. A broken wine glass rested next to their feet, another next to his father, a half-full bottle laid on the ground in the middle of a growing crimson stain. His father suddenly yelped and immediately started to look for something on the floor until he finally shoved Naruto out from his way. With an excited and relieved sigh he grabbed something from the floor and cleared his throat as Kushina's hysterical laugh died down into small giggles. So, putting this small disturbance to the side. Kushina. I'm still waiting for your answer. The named red-haired woman gulped and an odd expression spread over her fine features. She stepped closer to his father, carefully avoiding the glass shards on the floor, and sank down to her knees in front of Minato. Silent tears flowed from her eyes from the emotional roller coaster. The Hokage's muscles tensed during the long wait, his eyes drifting to his still confused brother for a moment, maybe to find some encouragement. In the next moment, Kushina flung herself into his arms, continuously murmuring something into his father's ears between almost silent sobs. But Minato's expression told Naruto that he was in the middle of devastating joy and ecstasy. A wide smile spread across Naruto's face when he finally spotted the small silver ring in his father's fingers. 2 small silver leaves were embracing a purple gem, steadying it in the middle of the jewelry, like parents would do for a child. The blonde teen immediately retreated from the room silently, with the widest smile on his face that he could manage. And suddenly all of his previous anxiety was gone. The future wasn't looking so dark anymore. Chapter 19. Deja Vu. The brawny form of Katsuchi had been shrouding most of the sight of the 4th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato from the curious eyes of the 4 genin teams standing patiently behind the commander, listening to their interaction. One young teen fidgeted from foot to finally get a closer look at the feared village leader, but the only thing he could see behind their giant escort was a glimpse of the man. His form, face and body were obscured continuously by the enormous back. Every time the young ninja's brown eyes had a slight chance to finally have a look at the Hokage's face, Katsuchi moved and the opening was immediately gone. After 10 minutes of constant trying he lost his patience and interest, and so instead left his eyes resting on their escort's back, unfocused. The guards hidden in the room were obviously stressed and tense from the amount of IWA shinobi in the middle of the Hokage Tower. However, the calm and composed attitude of their Kage helped to lighten the mood, despite the many hateful glares he received from the foreign genin who were fortunate enough to stand at a position whose angle allowed them to actually see him. I'm pleased to see this many applicants for the exam. I'm glad that Tsuchikage agreed to finally participate. A small, almost invisible smile appeared on the commander's mostly stern face. Minato clapped his hands, making some of the genins flinch by the sudden noise. Okay, one of my jounin will show you your accommodations. A training ground is reserved for your teams. He will also show you which one. During your stay, you may move freely throughout the village, but I must warn you, fights outside the exam won't be tolerated. The commander and most of the genins nodded. Minato gestured to the corner and a figure stepped out from the shadows, greeting the teams from Iowa with a small nod. Before they could leave the office, Kitsuchi stepped forward. Hokage-sama. With your permission, I would like to meet with Toriko-kun. Minato observed the well-built man in front of him for a long silent moment with an unreadable face, and in the end nodded. Permission of course granted. I won't forbid interaction with any shinobi from Konoha. Minato's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint before he continued. Of course, if there are any incidents, there will be consequences. The IWA shinobi nodded and left the room, silently following their guide. However, as soon as they stepped through the doorway of Minato's office, several shadows fall in line behind them, lurking behind dark corners, under bushes or between the thick crown of emerald green trees. NBU guards walked in their shadows the entire way throughout Konoha. Most of the teams settled down surprisingly quickly, despite their unknown surroundings. When Kitsuchi finally had the mindset to leave the restless genin alone, he left the room to look for the person he was currently the most interested in. He wandered the streets casually, not sure where he was actually going. His experienced eyes, however, swept his surroundings and an invisible map of Konoha already started to form in his mind. The commander shook his head when one of his genin tripped over something. The one who had been trying to follow him unnoticed ever since he had stepped out from their accommodation. The commander let out a long sigh, then slowly turned around to face the corner of a house where a second ago the boy had peeked over. Come out, Shiko! The boy's shoulders slumped from being caught, and slowly trekked toward his leader, his movement shadowed by their perfectly hidden ANBU guard. The commander watched the boy, who was in his early teens, nervously fidget from foot to foot. Why are you following me? His chocolate brown eyes looked down to his feet in shame, shaded by his brown bangs, even though they were pointing straight toward the sky, defying gravity and every law of nature. I'm bored. His answer was so simple and sincere that Kitsuchi only shook his head once more and waved an inviting hand to the genin to just follow him. A little while later he finally spotted what he was looking for. For shinobi, one of them with a bright blonde mop of hair and a pout on his face trailed after an older man with pure white hair as two more figures, a young man with gravity-defying silver hair and a girl with short, mousy brown locks, watched their argument from behind. They were heading to the outer part of the village, probably to the training grounds. They were quite far away, but he still could hear their loud argument. It was a fair bet. You lost. Just admit it, old man. Jiraiya snorted and folded his arms across his chest dismissively. I don't care. And I hereby close this argument. Plus, we've got company. The Toad Sage pointed toward the IWA commander and his companion with his head, but Naruto didn't care. He had already sensed Kitsuchi minutes ago. He just continued to mumble about untrustworthy old geezers and perverts until they were faced with the giant form of the IWA commander and the young genin at his side. Each of them shared a quick restrained nod as a greeting. Only Naruto grinned and beckoned enthusiastically. Hey Ajisen. How was your trip? Kitsuchi raised an eyebrow at the honorific, but in the end only shrugged. Eventless. I hope you brought your best genin with you, because we're giving them a long, tough run during the second phase. Naruto grinned at Shiko, who was observing him from head to toe suspiciously, not really caring that he was continuously leaking out a small amount of killer intent. You are one of the examiners? Yeah, thanks to the sissy and his abuse of power. Naruto mumbled with an irritated pout. The IWA commander frowned in his confusion, while the silver-haired jounin fought to restrain his chuckle. Naruto, behave. These are foreign ninja, not the man you once fought alongside. Don't just joke around. Plus you are abusing Minato's reputation. The blonde Chunin let out a perished sigh. The fox was right, and he was acting like a 10-year-old kid again, not thinking about the Hokage's status. Naruto finally gathered himself and cleared his throat. So what brought you to me anyway? I won't tell you any details about the exam. I want fair play. I don't really know actually. Kakashi sent a sharp and suspicious glance toward the giant man, while Jiraiya and Rin watched the interaction with calm, but observant eyes from the side. The huge man never looked Kakashi directly in the eyes, always just somewhere near eye level. Probably to restrain his urge to do something he would regret later. Kakashi sent a sharp and narrow glance toward the young genin, who was still staring at the blonde. The piercing look instantly washed away the killing intent from the boy's direction, who in response changed the focus of his attention to the young jounin, glaring daggers at him. Naruto shook his head at the scene and ruffled the silver locks of Kakashi, to his great annoyance. We were heading to the training grounds for a small spar. You can join if you would like to. Before the genin could retort, Katsuchi nodded, following the small team toward their destination. The IWA commander and his sulking young companion settled down at the edge of the clearing, not too far away from the rest of the team, watching as the blonde Chunin sent an annoyed glare when the Sennin whispered something to him. The blonde shook his head, folded his arms across his chest, and started sulking like a 10-year-old child, even stomping his feet to the ground. The battle of wills didn't last long, and in the end the young shinobi gave up and nodded in his acceptance, flinging his arms high into the air in defeat, though the irritation never left his face. Jiraiya slowly went to Rin's side and also settled down along the tree line, with a distance between them and the foreign duo. Her face was calm, but her eyes observed them suspiciously. What did you say to Torikaku-kun, sensei? Her voice was as soft as a whisper to hide their conversation. To hold back and not show off. The less IWA knows about his abilities the better. His rank as a Chunin makes everybody underestimate him. I told him to let Kakashi win. Rin nodded and turned her head back to her comrades. The spar was light, their movement fluid, both of them aware of the calculating eyes from the edge of the clearing. However, Naruto was annoyed. He had prepared a good move just for Kakashi this time, and because of the pervert he wouldn't be able to pull it out. Or maybe if he shook his head in irritation, dismissing the idea, as he restrained his instinct to deflect a kick from Kakashi. He didn't even have to concentrate on the battle. Kakashi was also holding back. Naruto made one more annoyed grimace. The whole fight was starting to become pointless. They were just toying with each other, and he became more and more frustrated as he let Kakashi land a hit on his spine. And to let Kakashi beat him? He snarled angrily from the thought. Katsuchi watched the duo from his spot and restrained the urge to narrow his eyes. His gaze was locked on Kakashi, who was obviously holding back, just playing with the blonde in the light spar. He noted the increasing frustration in his previous captive's eyes when the jounin managed to land more and more hits. The blonde suddenly blocked a well-aimed kick, and Katsuchi's eyes widened for a second when he noted that the boy wasn't even paying attention to the fight, his blue eyes drifting to the Sannin from time to time to send a set of imaginary daggers toward him. Moreover, he winced when he deflected the attack. He was frustrated because he had to hold back. But they were fighting on Chunin level. It made no sense to him. Why would a Chunin level fight irritate a Chunin? Not only that, the blonde had noted a successful deflect as a mistake. The IWA shinobi narrowed his eyes when realization hit him. The sissy sucks. Katsuchi didn't answer the genin's remark. It wasn't the jounin who held the upper level. It was Toriku, who swept the attack to the side as easily as it was just a child's plaything. It didn't matter how much he tried to hide it. He was holding back. And not just by a little. From the moment he realized this, the commander watched the fight from a new, calculating perspective. When they finally stopped the spar with Kakashi on top, pointing a kunai at the obviously angry and frustrated blonde, the sun was already high above the horizon, closer to the end of the day than to the beginning. Katsuchi and his young companion trailed after the still annoyed Chunin soundlessly, the larger man's eyes fixed on teenager's back, still eagerly calculating the real strength of the blonde, while his genin was still glaring daggers. They reached the city center soundlessly. Jiraiya and Rin excused themselves fairly quickly and left, but the Sannin sent a warning glare to Naruto before his departure. The Chunin rolled his eyes in answer, then stretched his arms behind his neck and let out a satisfied moan when one of his joints popped back to its proper place. I'm starving. Kakashi rolled his one visible eye in annoyance. You are always starving. Naruto shrugged casually and an evil smirk appeared on his face. Hey Kakashi. It's your turn to pay. The named Jounin narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Why would I? You can propitiate me for my wounded pride. The silver-haired teen snorted at the dramatic voice, and shook his head enthusiastically. I haven't got that much money. The teen shrugged, accepting his defeat quite quickly and glanced up to the huge IWA commander. Are you hungry, Kitsuchiya-san? I know a good place. Shiko snorted, forcing the blonde to move his sight to the small and angry form of the young genin, who sent another set of imaginary daggers toward the blonde. Like we would eat with you. Naruto's head slipped to the side, watching the child with a wondering expression on his face. And why would you say that? Because you are who you are. The child sent a narrow and hateful glare. And exactly who am I? Are you an idiot? We are from IWA. You are from Konoha. The Leaf killed hundreds of our comrades in the last war. The same goes for IWA. Why are you doing this? Why don't you want vengeance for your dead comrades? Where is the eye for an eye? Why are you acting so friendly? Naruto stayed silent, carefully observing the child in front of him. His eyes burned with hatred for everyone who carried the L Leaf insignia. Finally, he opened his mouth to answer. An eye for an eye is the same as the spiral of death. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Do you want to become blind too? Don't you want to see the future instead? The blonde Chunin said quietly, but his words were still strong even in its low tone. Then his seriousness was gone in the next second as he suddenly tapped the commander on his back in a friendly and casual way. That's why I don't care that you are from IWA. And you shouldn't either. We are all the same. We are Shinobi. The genin's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in his shock. The stunned commander made an amused snort and a small, half-smile appeared on his face. So be it. Lead the way, Toriko-kun. A satisfied wide grin appeared on Naruto's fine features and he grabbed the still shocked genin to drag him through half of the village, not concerned in the slightest by his struggle, his threats, his killing intent or his pathetic attempts to attack him and force him to let him go. Naruto simply dragged him all the way in a headlock until they reached Ichiraku's ramen stand, where he finally let the teen free. The entire way only the younger teens' displeased shouting, groans and bitching could be heard. Kakashi and Kitsuchi trailed behind them silently, each with an amused expression on his face. Naruto hopped down to the counter, and 5 minutes later he dug deep into a steaming bowl of ramen. The commander watched from the corner of his eye as his genin and the blonde Chunin continued their bickering when they finished their bowl, each in their own manner. His genin sulking and pouting, while Toriko ate as if he was slurping the food of the gods. It was odd. The scene was so pleasant it almost unnerved him. Shiko was in the process of absolutely forgetting that he was talking to a foreign shinobi, the one who he wanted to skin alive half an hour ago, just because of instincts. Their laughter filled the small stand and even the up till then restrained Hatake Kakashi joined in the conversation, but his one visible eye was on high alert every time he glanced at the brawny shinobi on the other end of the counter. Well, what do we have here? Bonding between the nations. I like that scene. The commander tensed when the new voice reached him and another blonde stepped into the small stand. He was close. He was too close for Kitsuchi's liking. Shiko glanced back at the newcomer with an annoyed expression on his face for interrupting their chat while the blonde Chunin only grinned and waved. Hello, Tuchi-san. The usual if you would be so kind. Minato smiled at the named man, who nodded with a knowing smile on his face and made a bow behind the counter after his eyes traveled to the two foreign shinobi. Minato casually sat down on the last empty seat between Kakashi and his relative, not concerned by the sudden silence and tensed muscles from the IWA commander and the curious but also annoyed glance from the foreign genin. He acted informally, even his appearance was casual. He had left his white coat back at the office. Only his normal jounin attire was on his body. Kakashi wondered if his sudden appearance and his looks were intentional. It was more than likely. His sensei never did anything without a reason. As the Hokage's meal finally arrived and he started eating silently, the tension slowly died down and a light chat took over the previous heavy silence. Kakashi made a mental nod. His sensei was trying to ease the tension between the two nations. Before he could continue, a poke at his shoulder kicked him out from his musing. Hey Kakashi! Don't you want to spar when we finish? I want a rematch for my broken pride. Naruto's voice was low and cocky, but Minato could still hear it, raising a confused eyebrow from the words. Rematch? Minato glanced back at Kakashi with a raised eyebrow, who nodded, but before his student could explain anything further, and save an embarrassing unveiling, the IWA genin answered the Hokage's question. He beat Sissy to the ground during their spar. You beat Toriku? Finally, Kakashi-kun, I'm so proud of you. Minato clapped his student on the back, who simply slammed his palm on his forehead, shaking it slowly. How on earth could his sensei be this dense sometimes? It was so rare when he did that, but when it happened it was always at the worst time. Sensei the Jounin groaned and slowly shook his head in disbelief once again, watching as his leader's smile faltered, when his eyes traveled toward the commander and the genin at his side. In the end he simply terminated the awkward moment with a casual shrug. Kitsuchi restrained a wide and satisfied grin. So he was right. The blonde is the stronger one, and his defeat was only to deceive them. The blonde Chunin's loud laugh filled the small place, kicking out everybody from his own musing, earning an annoyed and confused glare from the IWA genin. What's so funny? You suck. If every Chunin in Konoha is like you, then even I can kick your Hokage's butt. A sly but altogether cheeky smile spread across Minato's face as he leaned onto the counter to rest his chin in his palm and have a better viewpoint of his victim, eyeing the child from head to toe, unconcerned with the amused snort from his brother and his student, nor the widened eyes of the IWA commander. Oh, you think so? Minato asked with a sing-song voice, his free hand playing with his chopsticks, watching as the genin snorted, folded his arms in front of his chest and answered with a determined expression on his face. Definitely. I can arrange a spar with the Hokage for you. Minato continued playing with his chopsticks casually, and sent a warning side glance to Kakashi, who opened his mouth to scold the child. The genin also moved his lips to retort, when Minato sent him a sly, provoking smirk, but Kitsuchi's low, almost unnoticeable voice stopped the genin from answering to the challenge. Shiko-kun, you didn't see the village leader when we were in the office, did you? The genin glanced up to the commander and shrugged. No. You were always right in front of me. But my uncle said that he once met him on a mission before he retired some years ago. He told me that he fought while his hair was dyed pink. What Kage wannabe dyes his hair pink? He must be some fashion junkie pansy boy. His only answer was silence, forcing the boy to glance back to the frozen audience with a questioning look on his face. What? Naruto burst out with whining laughter as a response, continuously patting his frozen leader's back as Minato's sly smirk slowly slipped to the side, while Kakashi disappeared under the counter to hide his reaction. However, Naruto didn't have that kind of restraint. His guffaws filled the small ramen stand and most likely echoed around several streets in the district, and he had to grab his side when it started to sting by the force. Oh. He is a fashion junkie for sure. He finally managed to choke out between two barking laughs. Hey! Minato snorted and sent an angry and annoyed glare to his brother, who didn't look the least bit concerned about Yandame's narrowed eyes, defensively folded arms, or the slowly increasing killing intent sent to his hysterical brother. Kitsuchi watched the scene with an open mouth. He struggled between fearing for his genin's life and being amused by the Hokage's obviously embarrassing situation. I was pranked by Kushina for crying out loud, Minato grumbled behind his gritted teeth, but his voice was suppressed by Naruto's increasing laughter, which was very slowly dying down into small chuckles, while Minato's whole face turned bright red. Even his ears flamed in the crimson color. I remember that Kurama let out a loud snicker in his mindscape. She had sneaked inside his tent while he was sleeping. Hey, can you show it to me somehow? The fox slowly shook his head between two snickers, and Naruto made a disappointed mental pout. But he immediately brightened when an idea popped up in his head. We should repeat that. I want to see. If you try, you will die. Minato answered back with a stern and emotionless face and also sent a cold glare, but his brother only winked with a cheeky smile. His threatening and stern expression wasn't as effective as Minato originally intended with that massive blush on his face. The confused genin glanced back and forth between the shinobi in front of him, with a frown on his young face. However, before he could open his mouth to ask what the hell was going on, a man in Chunin attire stepped inside the ramen stand and made a bow, patiently waiting for Minato to pay attention to him. The older blonde finally gathered himself, and looked over his shoulder to let out a long sigh at the sight of the gate guard. Yeah? The participants from Kiri have arrived at the gates, Minato-sama. The genin narrowed his eyes at the scene, observing it silently. Thank you? I'm coming. The Kage stretched his arms behind his neck, waiting for the familiar popping sound from his joints, then turned to his brother with narrowed eyes. I was serious. If you try it, you will be executed for treason. Even if you just think about it. The Chunin snorted, rolled his eyes, and turned away from his father with a pout on his face. Kitsuchi-san, I'm sorry I have to go. The commander nodded with a slightly open mouth as a farewell, still somewhat shocked, watching as Minato winked at the still confused genin and walked out from the stand, his hands casually buried deep inside his pockets after he sent one last warning glare to his brother. It would still be worth a try, he is just bluffing. The commander turned his head toward the muttering blonde Chunin with disbelief on his face. He couldn't be serious, could he? Pranking the Hokage? Then he thought back to the last few minutes. Everything was so different than what he first thought when the Hokage had stepped inside the stand. He was carefree, friendly, cheerful, and casual. He wasn't behaving like what the rumors had about him. He wasn't a cold-hearted killer. He was powerful. He would never deny it. Even when embarrassed to death, Kitsuchi could still feel the powerful aura hovering around him continuously. Like there were two different personalities in that man. Calm and powerful when he acted like a Kage, like during Iwa Nin's captivity, and now without his hat he was so casual and friendly, like anyone else. Maybe they weren't as different as he first thought. Shiko's voice kicked him out from his musing. Who was that guy? Naruto burst out laughing again, and waved a dismissive hand. My brother. Is he also one of the Chunin exam proctors? Kakashi opened his mouth to answer, but Naruto silenced him by clapping his hand over his mouth with a cheeky smile on his face as he winked at the Iwa commander, while he answered. Yeah, something like that. Kitsuchi slowly shook his head and let out a long sigh. Come on, Shiko, we should get back. You'll have a long day tomorrow. They left the stand, followed by Kakashi's narrowed gaze. He and Naruto stayed there for a little while longer before they also departed toward the Hokage Tower. They didn't speak until they reached their destination, only walking side by side silently in the late afternoon's crowded streets. But apparently Kakashi lost his patience and his composure as he let out his worrying thoughts. What's wrong with you? Both of you were acting like nothing had happened. Like he didn't kidnap you or try to kill us. Kakashi's real strength isn't measured with strong. The real strength of a person is his willpower. He is stronger than you if he has the strength to forgive. You should also seek that kind of power. He imperceptibly flinched and stayed silent for a long minute before he finally turned his head toward the blonde teen. If someone killed your friend, would you be able to forgive? Naruto observed the teen cautiously, and he really hoped that the roller coaster of his emotions couldn't be seen on his face. He had been able to forgive Nagato. Was he really ready to forgive Obito if he faced him? Was he ready to save him from the darkness? The blonde chewed on his lower lips before he answered. I am willing to forgive and save any soul from the circle of hatred. Kakashi frowned. He hadn't actually answered in theory. It was a sheer statement. A declaration maybe to himself. A sudden new presence stopped the flood of his thoughts. He turned his head to the side to face three genin teams from Kiri, heading toward the Hokage Tower. Obviously the teams the Chunin guard had informed Minato about. Naruto glanced around them, observing the members carefully, one by one. So many young children. His eyes locked on the smallest one, and he had to restrain a gasp. He couldn't be more than 10. Probably less, maybe 8? His eyes wandered toward the tallest one, the leader of the genin teams. Naruto blinked, and only his last bit of self-control kept him from simply dropping to the ground and landing on his ass in surprise with an open mouth in a not very shinobi way. His eyes were fixed on a half-bandaged face and stern, stabbing eyes until his gaze wandered toward the Hittite with the 4 waving lines. He couldn't help himself, he just stared directly into his face silently with an open mouth. The young foreign shinobi narrowed his eyes and stepped out from the group to stand in front of Naruto, leaning into his personal space until they were only centimeters from each other. The Chunin restrained an amused snort when he realized that the shinobi had risen onto his toes just to be at eye level with him, but the proper amount of killing intent waved away his amusement in the next second, though only for a brief moment, before it returned with increased strength. Why are you staring at me, Blondie? You want something from me? Naruto's eyes finally wandered away from his face to land on his Jounin vest for a second, before he started to look for the familiar giant sword on his back, but it seemed he hadn't gained it yet. What are you looking behind my back for? Naruto cleared his throat, to gather himself and to hide an amused snort, but he felt Kakashi's smaller hands between their bodies pushing them slightly away from each other. Sorry, but Blondie is mine, shrimp. Confrontation between the genin outside of the exam is prohibited. I suggest you go and register your teams inside the Hokage Tower instead of bothering named Blondie. Stern and cold black eyes wandered toward the newcomer, observing the young teen prodigy next to him for a long silent moment. Oh, I'm pleased. Spiky silver hair, half-face mask, Hittite on his left eye. One of the youngest shinobi who managed to get into the bingo books. If the rumors and descriptions are true, you must be Hatake Kakashi. B-rank Jounin? The named teen raised an eyebrow. And you would be? Momochi Zabuza, demon of the hidden mist. The silver-haired teen narrowed his eyes, observing his opponent more aware than before. You were the last one who graduated from the old system. It was you who forced the Mizukage to reform it. I'm glad my reputation reaches this far. He leaned toward Kakashi, in the same way he had toward Naruto a minute before, but his movement froze midway when Naruto couldn't restrain himself anymore and burst out in a loud laugh. Anger rose inside Zabuza's chest, and he immediately turned toward the still almost girlishly giggling blonde teen. Do you think it's funny? Naruto only waved a hand, finally composing himself. No, of course not. I just got déjà vu. The blonde shrugged, waving a hand with a grin on his face, and left the more surprised than angry Kiri with Kakashi to head toward the top story of the Hokage Tower. Maybe this is going to be more fun than I thought. Naruto glanced around the crowded room from next to the wall where he'd been sitting since the first round of the Chunin selection exams had started. His eyes wandered toward the dark figure of Makoto behind the desk on the large podium. It was strange. Everything seemed so damn familiar. The previous hour triggered the memories of his own exam. The nostalgia and the almost continuous déjà vu overwhelmed every single one of his senses. He watched with foggy eyes when two instructors had distracted the genin teams and sent some of them to a wrong building, the bickering in the corridors between two boys from Leaf, and he had to restrain a loud snicker with a cough when a small girl with purple hair and a Leaf insignia hopped onto the table on the podium and challenged every single person inside the room with a loud roar. Oh, Anko! His reactions weren't missed by the head interrogator, and Naruto was sure that after the second part of the exam was finished, he would be summoned for another short session with Inoichi, or at least a long talk with his father, which was more likely to happen. The named interrogator glanced toward him, and their eyes locked for a second before Naruto sent a foxy grin toward him. The scarred man rolled his eyes in response. The blonde Chunin turned his head back to the row he was assigned to watch and grimaced when a genin from Kumo made his last mistake and lost the chance to participate in the next session. With perfect aim his hand shot forward, and in the next second a shuriken embedded itself into the hard surface of the table in front of the shocked genin. 6, 12 and 36 are out. The three genin left the room, sending hateful glances toward him, the tingling sensation of their killing intent finally dying down when they left the room after one last stabbing look. Naruto shook his head and let out a sigh, while his eyes moved back to the gap-toothed row. Every genin had gotten at least one mark on the sheet in the first 10 minutes, except one. The row on his clipboard for notes about the purple-haired loud-mouthed girl was still blank. Anko was damn good. He had to admit, Orochimaru did a good job with her training. His mind wandered back to the past. When they had found the exhausted girl on the edge of the once proud Leaf Village, they had thought she was dead. No one had known about her mission to follow Kabuto. After her recovery, she had jumped into the battles without hesitation. She fought like a wild tiger. Vengeance burned her coils from within until the old Reaper had finally claimed her during one of the last battles. A frown appeared on his face when an old mystery pushed itself into his thoughts. Her curse seal of heaven had simply disappeared from her neck without any trace of it ever having been there, but she hadn't been able to give any explanations for it. She had been unconscious for a long time after they'd found Kabuto, and she never recovered any memories about what had happened. Maybe it wasn't his imagination. Was Orochimaru's chakra signature really there? Naruto shook his head to clear his thoughts. None of that had happened yet. None of them were going to happen. It didn't matter now. He restrained a snort when he noticed a small puddle of water, slowly rippling down from one of the higher rows toward its destination on the floor. His eyes swept around, trailing the wet line back from the puddle until he found the source. A boy maybe around 14, long black hair and with a scuba mask? Naruto narrowed his eyes when the puddle finally stopped under an almost identical-looking boy. His eyes traveled back and forth between the two figures, and when he noted the two similar iron claws on their hands, realization hit him like thunder. He masked his laugh with a cough when he noticed a giant spot on the cheek of one of them, and thanks to another Chunin's sharp eyes, the demon brothers left the room in the next minute after a well-aimed kunai stuck into the wood of the table. He winked at the young boy from IWA who he'd shared his ramen with yesterday, but he received only a snort, and he immediately turned back to his paper. Naruto let out a sigh and continued his watch for opportunities to reduce the numbers. Naruto channeled more chakra into his legs and leaped high in the air to land gracefully on a thick branch deep inside the forest of death to get a better viewpoint. It was already the third day of the exam, and his barrier and trap seals had caught more teams than he expected. After all, he had made them to be on a level where the teams could spot them and even counter them if they were sneaky enough. His experienced eyes watched as a genin team from Kumo fought their battle to defend their scroll from a leaf team, the one led by the very noisy Anko. Naruto grimaced as Snake shot forward from the child's arms to grab a foreign ninja and toss him to the ground. The scroll from his hand rolled out to disappear under a thick bush. Naruto suddenly stiffened when someone revealed himself from behind his back. His instincts kicked in, and with speed that even Minato would appreciate, he whirled around with a kunai already in his hand to face the newcomer. He felt as a cold sweat slowly ran down his spine when he found himself face to face with one of the Sannin who was currently grasping his wrist to stop the attack only millimeters from his face, which was occupied with a smug smile. "Jumpy, aren't we?" Naruto shook off the ice-cold hand, and took several steps backward to gain as much distance as he could manage on the branch without falling off as his thoughts raced with insane speed. He hadn't felt him. Again. That damn bastard had been able to sneak up on him again. No one was able to do that when he was on high alert, only Minato and Kakashi. Nobody else. Yet here he was. He'd been fooled again. He'd underestimated that bastard again. My, suddenly so silent. By the rumors, that's not like you, Torikoku-kun. Naruto narrowed his eyes, watching every movement of the Sannin carefully. I'm not in the mood to chit-chat. A half-smile spread across Orochimaru's face as he eyed his companion silently. In the next second he averted his gaze and glanced down to the battle at their feet. I just came to check up on my student. Naruto didn't move his eyes off of him, not even for a second to look down. She is doing well. The Kumo team has already lost, they just don't know it yet. At that moment, an explosion shook the lands at their feet and he couldn't restrain himself. Naruto glanced down to check on what was happening as debris shot up to where they stood. The trap Anko and her team had set up before the ambush finally triggered. After noting the scene below, he immediately glanced back to check on the snake, whose gaze was locked on him once again. The Sannin turned and very slowly approached him. Naruto hadn't moved, his muscles tensed to the breaking point as the pale man came closer and closer to pass beside him on the thick branch. But the snake stopped next to him to whisper into his ears. You are a very interesting young man, Torikoku-kun. His lean fingers slowly reached toward his cheek to trace one of his whisker marks, and to touch a small trail of blood that flowed from a scratch by the debris Naruto wasn't even aware of. However, when he felt the cold touch on his skin, he immediately moved and twisted out from his reach. A sly smile appeared on the snake's face, but in the next second it disappeared as he turned to Naruto casually, a curious expression on his face. The human body is a fascinating machine. The Sannin trailed off for a second, his face becoming thoughtful as he glanced up to the sky, then he glanced back to his companion. I'm interested in some of your equally fascinating abilities, Torikoku-kun. Especially in your increased healing ability that you've hidden well until now. Not the one everybody knows about, the one you've awakened only recently. The one that can grow new tissues in mere seconds. Orochimaru pointed a finger toward his cheek and Naruto unconsciously raised his hand to ease away the cold feeling that was still lingering on his skin. The small cut was already gone. When the second round of the exams is over, I would like to ask for your cooperation in some of my research. Naruto felt as his eyes bulged out from his skull. He had thought the snake was going to attack him, try to knock him out, to do whatever he was planning to do with him, but to ask him openly to cooperate. The blonde narrowed his eyes and measured up the suspiciously from head to toe. And why would I cooperate with you? Orochimaru shrugged casually. I found some really interesting things about you which could give you some answers about your lost past. Naruto folded his arms across his chest dismissively and narrowed his eyes. I'm not interested. A sly smile spread across Orochimaru's gaze, before he shrugged and turned around to walk away. It's a shame. Then maybe Minato-kun will be more concerned with why his brother has a 50% match with his beloved Kushina-chan's DNA. A sudden rush of adrenaline ran through Naruto's veins as he reached forward to grab and stop the Sannin. Wait! A low chuckle left Orochimaru as he slowly turned around and noted the worry in the azure-blue eyes. Oh. It seems that this isn't a surprise to you. More likely it's worrying you. Naruto narrowed his eyes to slits and took a step backward to regain their previous distance. Well, it seems your lost memories aren't as lost as everybody thinks. Am I right, Toriko-kun? Another set of creepy chuckles bubbled out of Orochimaru at seeing the boy's telling wince. What do you want from me? Some blood and tissue samples for my research. That will be enough for a time. If you cooperate, your little secret will be safe with me. Wait for me after the second round. How do I know that you haven't already run to Jiraiya or to Minato? The snake answered with a sinister smile. You don't know. With this last statement, the Sannin disappeared with a shunshin, leaving the still shocked teen alone with his disturbed thoughts and some slowly whirling leaves. Naruto sank down on the branch as his knees gave up the battle to hold his weight, his legs hanging freely in the air while his arms clutched his head to ruffle through his blonde locks in his annoyance and fury. Anko's team had left the clearing sometime during the middle of their confrontation. The only thing which disturbed the unnatural silence around him was the rhythmical breathing of the unconscious team from Kumo. He murmured softly into the silent woods. What should we do now, Kurama? The fox stayed in silence for a long minute, gathering his own thoughts. Have you ever heard the saying, keep your friends close but your enemies closer? Naruto snorted, and opened his mouth to respond, but he was silenced by a wave of an enormous tail in his mindscape. The fact that he knows about your connection with Kushina is disturbing, but it also gives us an opportunity. We can keep a close eye on him, and we can finally know about his hideouts. And don't talk aloud. Who knows who else can sneak up on us in this timeline? We can't make the same mistake twice. He thinks I have a bloodline or something. Kurama nodded in his mindscape as a response. Why does he ask for my permission? Why didn't he simply try to knock me out and drag me along? Don't you think it would be suspicious? The disappearance of one of the proctors would bring too much attention to him as the head supervisor. The Forest of Death is a dangerous place, but not for you, and Minato also knows this. So I should just walk inside the snake's nest willingly and cheerfully? Don't mince my words. Willingly but prepared. We are strong. We can get rid of him easily, or at least mark his hideout. What if he tells them? Why would he? Currently he thinks he can benefit more if they don't know. Naruto let out a long and weary sigh, running his hand through his golden locks. His eyes wandered down to the unconscious Kumo team, when he heard a soft rustle behind the large bushes and the thick smell of a predator reached his nose. Another sigh left his lips, then he jumped down gracefully just in time to face the giant tiger at the edge of the thick woods who was currently preparing to get an easy meal. Azure eyes snapped to the side when the pale-faced exam supervisor turned his head, and he felt the stabbing glance on his body. Orochimaru sent a sinister smirk down to Naruto from the balcony, who let out a low growl from the back of his throat and instead focused his sight on the genins who stood next to him, waiting impatiently for Minato to finally appear and close the second round of the exams. He glanced up to the giant statue showing a hand sign. Sweet nostalgia rushed through him one more time and finally distracted him from his thoughts about Orochimaru's blackmail. His eyes lingered on the teams. So many children made it, just like back then. 7 genin teams stood straight and proud in the middle of the battle ring, unaware of the preliminary round that was surely to come. Their numbers were just too high. The final battles would last too long. Just like before. 2 squads managed to finish the second stage from Konoha and 1 each from Iwa, Suna, Kiri, and Kumo. Only 1 team managed to pass the second stage from the smaller countries, the squad from Takigakure. Naruto rested his eyes on a very small child from that team, maybe not more than 10. The girl suddenly turned around. She probably felt his curious gaze on her side. She looked so familiar. She even felt familiar. Shoulder-length mint green hair framed her chubby and childish face. Big orange eyes narrowed suspiciously when he sent a wide grin after being caught. She rolled her childish eyes in response and turned back to her previous observation. She is the container of Komiai, the seven-tailed beast. Naruto winced. She looks so young. She just looks premature. She's always looked like a teen even when she was over 20. He felt a tug at his clothes, forcing him out from his musing to glance down. A weary-looking Shiko looked up at him with obvious annoyance from behind the dirt and scratches on his face. When will your Hokage arrive? It's irritating. I want to finally see him. Now. Naruto rolled his eyes when he heard Minato's cocky voice behind his back and turned around to face his father, who had appeared just in time at his permanent seal to hear the genin's question. The yondaime stepped to the side and winked at the stunned Iwa genin once more, before he gracefully walked toward the small stage in front of the giant statue. His white long coat elegantly followed the rhythm of his fluid steps, while Shiko's eyes were frozen on the giant red kanji on its back, shouting away his true identity. Yandame ho Hokage? The genin stuttered to himself. See? I told you, he is a fashion junkie. Naruto sent a reassuring grin to Shiko, who was stunned and shocked to his very core, and couldn't remove his wide eyes from the softly smiling Minato as the man watched over the genin teams from the raised platform. But in the end, Shiko still managed a slow, small nod in agreement. The blonde leader cleared his throat and started his speech about the alliance between nations, the peace, the war, and also the importance of acceptance and forgiveness. Naruto's mind wandered off, his eyes moving toward the Jounin sensei and escorts of the teams silently standing in the background. His eyes narrowed when he spotted the black figure of Danzo, lurking in the shadows, his gaze lingering on the members of the two Konoha teams. He is probably looking for new potential recruits for Root. Naruto made a mental nod, but he had to stop any further thoughts as shocked and angry murmurs ran through the genin. A wide, nostalgic grin spread across Naruto's face. Oh yeah? The same reaction as ours when we were told about the preliminaries. When the murmuring finally died down and the mood settled into a determined waiting, none of the genin volunteered to leave the exams. The fights will start after a 10-minute break. Let me remind you one more time. I don't want any unnecessary and pointless deaths. All of us have suffered enough loss in the war. During the matches you must either knock your opponent out or he must forfeit. If you kill your opponent you will be disqualified. Think of it as a mission you could be appointed to when you become a Chunin. Assassination is the rarest kind of mission your village will give you. After Minato's announcement, the crowd slowly started to move up to the wide balcony, and he felt another tug. Naruto let out a sigh before he looked down at the angry Shiko. Why didn't you tell me who he was? I made a complete idiot of myself. Naruto sent back a cocky smile. It was just too hilarious to watch. Don't be afraid. He doesn't bite. The cocky smile morphed into a smirk, mostly the genin grimaced, and they moved together up the stairs. Hey Shiko, if you pass the preliminaries I'll pay for your ramen later. The genin snorted and passed the Hokage with flaming red ears, his thoughts wandering back to a week ago, while Naruto stopped and stayed in the background to have a word with Minato before the preliminaries started. As soon as the Hokage gave his last order, Naruto moved closer to whisper into his ears. The small girl from Takigakure has the 7 tails sealed inside her. Minato glanced back with a calm face and sent back a soft smile. We know about her. We were informed in advance so we wouldn't take it as a threat, but thanks for your concern. Naruto nodded and hopped down to the middle of the battle ring to announce the first fight, only to a minute later move back to the balcony to watch from a distance, prepared to interfere if necessary. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have to wait too long. The first fight was over in 5 minutes and the next two finished almost equally fast. These genin were strong. They were more trained and experienced than his generation was back then. But it was most likely because of the war. Finally it was a familiar head's turn to face her opponent. Enko hopped down from the balcony to land in a graceful crouch to face the sand genin. The first part of their fight was most likely fooling around, based on the sour grimace on Orochimaru's face. Enko was playing with the boy in his early teens and, to his annoyance, the small girl deflected every attack with ease. Naruto made a grimace when Enko finally decided to attack seriously and a set of familiar snakes shot forward from her arms, twisting around the terrified boy. But in the next blink, the boy was gone in a puff of smoke, his body was replaced by a wooden chair, and the panting boy reappeared in the chair's previous place next to Naruto and Minato on the balcony. "Get down here, you pansy! I'm not finished with you!" Enko's harsh but childish voice sent a shiver down the boy's spine, and after a second of consideration he simply gave up the fight. He made the right decision. His reserves were running low, not to mention the multiple wounds on his body from the previous 5 days in the woods. Naruto watched as Shiko knocked out his opponent in the next round with a flashy earth jutsu. To the child's great annoyance, Naruto gave him a pat on the back as he passed by after the fight. As the end of the fights came closer and closer, Naruto became more and more nervous, and he began to send more and more sidelong glances toward Orochimaru. Each fleeting second seemed to pass by unbelievingly fast. One more round. Naruto forced his senses back to the battle at his feet. 2 boys were fighting, one from IWA, the other from Kumo. Naruto narrowed his gaze when the flames of hatred dulled Cloud Nin's eyes when the genin trapped Shiko's teammate, a kunai already at his throat, threatening to slice through his flesh. "Give up!" The jeopardized boy narrowed his eyes, he obviously wouldn't forfeit willingly. Naruto let out a sigh at the stubborn child, but his eyes widened when the Kumo boy pressed the blade closer to the struggling boy, painting a thin red line across his throat with his dangerous metal brush. Shiko's teammate froze, his eyes widened with horror, when the winner leaned closer and pressed the blade even further and started talking. Most likely only Naruto's sensitive ears picked up what he whispered into the boy's ears. "I was really hoping you wouldn't forfeit, son of Saramara Unki. I will get my revenge on you for my father. I will make Chunin in the next exam." The Cloud Genin's muscles tensed, his nerves already sending the signals to move his arm, kunai in hand, to the side and make a perfect slice, but before his muscles could obey the direction, a strong hand wrapped around his wrist, stopping him in his attempt. "The winner of this match is Takagawa Takiji. Now release him," Naruto stated coldly, his hand still gripping the genin's tense wrist, eyeing him with narrowed eyes. The boy snarled back in his anger and sent a furious glare in reply. After a long silent moment, the Kumo nin finally took a step backward, and only then did Naruto release his grip and let the boy disappear. The IWA genin closed his eyes and slumped to the ground, gripping his bleeding neck, his eyes staring in front of him unfocused as the adrenaline suddenly rushed out of his body. When the medics arrived, together with the worried Shiko and Katsuchi, the boy finally gathered himself enough to glance up to his savior. How did you know he was going to kill me?" Naruto shrugged. "I heard what he told you." The boy nodded and made a small bow. Thank you?" Naruto grinned back and returned to the balcony to discuss his interference with his father. His steps were followed by the curious eyes of Katsuchi. When everything settled down, the crowd started to disappear as Minato announced the date and pairs for the next and final round and disappeared within the next blink. As the teams were also leaving one by one, Naruto glanced around nervously, looking for the snake, but he couldn't find him. He walked to the side and leaned against the wall, waiting patiently for the last shinobi to leave the place while he utilized the opportunity to have a decent plan as to what the hell he was going to do. Before any useful plan could be forged in his mind, he was kicked out from his mindscape when pale and lean fingers dropped onto his shoulders. "Shall we go, Torikakuin?" When Naruto opened his eyes, he was faced with Orochimaru's excited and predatory smile. That was the last thing he saw, before they disappeared from the middle of the forest of death with a swirl of leaves. Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this what if, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love. Peace out, Shinobi.